They called me a thief. They said I came to steal. But what I took from that room wasn't what anyone expected, and it would save her life. Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now let's dive into the story. Amara's hands were inside the jewelry box when the alarm started screaming. Not the kind of alarm you hear in movies, no. This was the kind of sound that vibrated through your bones, the kind that rich people install when they have so much to protect they can't even imagine what it's like to own nothing. The kind that says someone like her, someone with dirt under her fingernails and second-hand clothes, had crossed a line she was never supposed to see, let alone touch. Her fingers closed around something small, something that felt like ice against her palm despite the sweat coating her skin. The jewelry box was mahogany, probably worth more than every piece of furniture in her apartment combined, lined with burgundy velvet that looked like it had never been touched by anything less than diamonds. And there were diamonds. God, there were so many diamonds. Necklaces that could pay for college. Bracelets that could buy a house. Rings that sparkled even in the dim light filtering through silk curtains that probably cost more per yard than her father made in a month. But Amara wasn't looking at any of that. She was looking at one earring. Just one. Gold and pearl. Delicate and deadly, missing its twin. Missing something else, too. Her heart was slamming against her ribs, so hard she thought it might crack through. The alarm kept shrieking. Somewhere in the mansion, she could hear shouting. Heavy footsteps. Multiple heavy footsteps, the kind that meant security guards, the kind that meant men with badges and guns and zero patience for a 12-year-old black girl with her hands in a white billionaire's jewelry. Isadora stood in the doorway. 8 years old. Blonde hair like spun gold, because of course it was. Eyes wide and blue and terrified, because of course they were. She was wearing a nightgown that probably cost more than Amara's entire wardrobe, silk with lace trim, the kind of thing Amara had only seen in store windows she'd never walk into. And she was watching Amara with her hand over her mouth, trying to scream, trying to call for help, trying to do what any rich little girl should do when she finds an intruder in her mother's bedroom. But no sound came out, because Isadora Thornfield couldn't scream, couldn't yell, couldn't make a single sound, because Isadora Thornfield was deaf. And Amara knew why. The smell of the room was suffocating. Expensive perfume, the kind that comes in bottles shaped like art, mixed with the scent of fresh flowers that someone changed every single day. There was marble under Amara's feet, white and pristine, probably imported from Italy or France or someplace Amara had only seen in textbooks. Her sneakers, worn and dirty with soles that were starting to separate, left marks on that perfect white surface. Evidence. Proof. A trail that screamed she didn't belong here, would never belong here, shouldn't even know this room existed. The curtains were silk. Real silk, the kind that catches light and holds it, shimmering like water. They were pulled back just enough to show the window, floor to ceiling, overlooking grounds that stretched farther than Amara could see in the darkness. Gardens. Fountains. A life so far removed from her own it might as well be another planet. And she was about to destroy it all. She pocketed the earring. Isadora's eyes went wider. Her mouth opened again, that automatic human response to shock, but still no sound. Just silence. 5 years of silence. 5 years of a little girl trapped in a world without voices, without music, without her own laughter echoing back to her. 5 years because someone had been too proud to listen, too powerful to be questioned, too rich to be wrong. The footsteps were getting closer. Amara could hear them now over the alarm. Fussed, purposeful, coming up the stairs, down the hallway, toward this room where a girl who didn't belong was holding evidence that would either save a life or destroy her own. Her phone was in her other pocket. She'd taken pictures, evidence, proof, the kind of proof that her mother had died trying to document, the kind of proof that could make people listen or get her thrown in juvenile detention, depending on who got to tell the story first. Isadora took a step forward. For a second, Amara thought she was going to try to stop her. Thought this was the moment where the rich girl chose her family over the truth, where privilege won like it always did, where Amara would learn the lesson she'd been taught her whole life, that people like her don't win against people like them. But Isadora didn't grab for the earring. She grabbed Amara's hand and squeezed, not to stop her, to say something, to communicate in the only way she could, and in that squeeze, Amara felt everything. The loneliness, the silence, the years of doctors and specialists and tests and treatments that never worked because none of them were looking for what Amara had found. None of them believed a dead nurse who tried to speak up. None of them thought to check the jewelry box. The door exploded open. Not literally, but that's what it felt like. 1 second it was closed, heavy oak that probably weighed more than Amara did, and the next it was slamming against the wall with a crack that made her jump. Security guards poured in, 3 of them, big men in black uniforms with radios crackling and hands on their belts where weapons lived. Behind them, filling the doorway like a storm cloud, was Thaddeus Thornfield, 45 years old, and every inch of him screamed power. Custom suit, probably Italian, definitely worth more than Amara's father made in a year. Silver threading through his dark hair at the temples, the kind of distinguished that came from never worrying about money or time or anything real people worried about. His face was twisted in rage, the kind of rage that came from someone daring to enter his world without permission, someone touching what was his, someone proving that his walls and alarms and money couldn't actually keep him safe from the truth. His eyes locked on Amara, then dropped to where her hand was still in her pocket, then rose to his daughter, still holding the hand of a girl who wasn't supposed to exist in his universe. Time did that thing where it stretches, where 1 second becomes 5, where Amara could see everything, feel everything, understand that everything was about to change and there was no going back. She crossed the line, broken in, stolen something, and it didn't matter that what she'd stolen was the key to giving his daughter her hearing back. It didn't matter that she'd spent 6 months researching, investigating, risking everything to solve what dozens of specialists couldn't. It didn't matter that her mother had died being silenced by the same man's threats and power. What mattered was that she was 12 years old, black, poor, and standing in a billionaire's bedroom with her hand in her pocket and his jewelry inside it. What mattered was that she looked guilty. What mattered was that to everyone who would hear the story, she would be the thief, and he would be the victim. Thaddeus Thornfield's voice, when it came, was ice. Pure ice. Don't move. If you want to know what Amara pulled from that jewelry box and why it changed everything, you need to subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller right now. Because if you scroll past the story, you'll never know the truth about what a poor black girl risked everything to save. And honestly, if you don't subscribe, drop a comment explaining why this story doesn't deserve 10 seconds of your time. I'll wait. The security guards moved first. Fussed. Hands on Amara's shoulders, spinning her around, pressing her face first against the wall, next to a painting that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. The marble was cold against her cheek. She could smell the cleaning solution someone had used to make it shine, probably her father, probably on his hands and knees while people like Thaddeus Thornfield walked past without seeing him. One guard kicked her feet apart, another pulled her arms behind her back. She heard the metallic click of handcuffs and felt the steel bite into her wrists. "Check her pockets," Thaddeus said. His voice was steady now, controlled. The rage was still there, but buried under layers of authority, the kind of authority that came from never being told no, from knowing that whatever he said would become reality because he had the power to make it so. The guard's hands were rough, impersonal, searching. He pulled out her phone first, held it up like evidence, like proof of her guilt. Then his hand went back into her pocket and emerged with the earring. The earring! Gold catching the light, pearl missing from its setting, delicate and damning. Thaddeus stared at it. Something flickered across his face, too fast to read, but it was there. Recognition, maybe, or confusion, or the beginning of understanding that this wasn't what he thought it was. But the moment passed. His face hardened again. "You broke into my home," he said, each word deliberate, each word a nail in her coffin. "You went through my wife's private belongings. You stole from us." Amara tried to speak, but the guard pressed harder against her shoulders, and the words choked off. She could see Isadora in her peripheral vision, still standing there, both hands over her mouth now, tears streaming down her face. Silent tears, soundless crying, and something in that silence made everything worse. "Sir!" One of the other guards, younger, uncertain. Should we call the police? Already done, Thaddeus said. They're en route. Police. The word dropped into Amara's stomach like a stone. This was real. This was happening. She'd known it might, had calculated the risk, had decided it was worth it, but knowing something and living it are different things. Police meant arrest. Arrest meant juvenile detention. Juvenile detention meant her father alone. No one to cook his meals or remind him to take his blood pressure medication or sit with him on the nights when missing her mother was too much to bear alone. Mr. Thornfield, a woman's voice, sharp with panic, coming from the hallway. Evangeline Thornfield appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a silk robe that probably cost what Amara's father made in 3 months. She was beautiful in that preserved way that money bought, auburn hair perfect even in the middle of the night, makeup still flawless, diamonds at her throat, because apparently some people wore diamonds to bed. Her eyes swept the scene and landed on her daughter. Isadora, baby, come here. Get away from her. But Isadora didn't move. She stood there, 8 years old and frozen, looking at Amara pressed against the wall and the earring in the guard's hand and her father's face and her mother's panic, and something was happening behind those blue eyes. Something was clicking into place. Isadora! Evangeline's voice rose. Now! Isadora shook her head. It was small, barely a movement, but it was defiance, and in that moment, Evangeline Thornfield's face transformed from panic to fury. She crossed the room in 3 steps, grabbed her daughter's arm, and yanked her backward. Isadora stumbled. Her mouth opened in what would have been a cry of pain if she could make sound. And Amara, pressed against the wall with hands cuffed behind her back, felt rage ignite in her chest so fierce it shocked her. Don't hurt her! The words exploded out of Amara before she could stop them. Don't you dare hurt her! The room went still. Evangeline stared at her like she'd just witnessed a cockroach speak French. Thaddeus's eyes narrowed. The guards tensed. Because what kind of 12-year-old thief tells a billionaire how to treat their child? What kind of intruder, caught red-handed, still has the audacity to give orders? Excuse me. Evangeline's voice could have cut glass. She's trying to tell you something, Amara said, and she knew she should stop, knew every word was making this worse, but she couldn't. 6 months of research and planning and fear, 6 months of carrying her mother's silenced voice, 6 months of watching Isadora suffer in silence when the answer was right there in that jewelry box, and these people were still too blind to see it. She knows why I'm here. She knows what I found. You found, Thaddeus said, stepping closer, an opportunity to rob us. That's what you found. And believe me, you will pay for it. I found the reason your daughter is deaf. The words hung in the air like smoke. Amara watched them land. Watched Evangeline's face go slack. Watched Thaddeus freeze mid-step. Watched the guards exchange glances that said they were not paid enough to deal with whatever this was turning into. What? Thaddeus said slowly. Did you just say? The earring, Amara said, and her voice was shaking now, but she pushed through it. It's missing a pearl. It's been missing a pearl for 5 years. Since Isadora was 3 years old. Since the day she went deaf. Evangeline looked at the earring in the guard's hand. Really looked at it. The color drained from her face. That's my earring. The one that broke. I thought. She stopped. Swallowed. The nanny. Helena. She said Isadora put the pearl in her ear. Amara finished. And you fired her. You called her a liar. You threatened to deport her family. My mother was the nurse who examined Isadora that day. She saw the truth. She tried to tell you. And you destroyed her too. Silence. The kind of silence that feels like pressure, like the moment before lightning strikes, like the world holding its breath. Thaddeus's face had gone from rage to something else. Something complicated. Something that might have been the first crack in his certainty. That's impossible. Isadora has been examined by the best specialists in the country. The best in the world. Multiple imaging studies. If there was something lodged in her ear, they would have found it. Not if it was positioned where they weren't looking, Amara said. Not if it had calcified. Not if everyone was so sure it couldn't be there that no one bothered to check. She was talking fast now, words tumbling over each other. My mother documented it. She wrote it all down. The angle of the ear canal, the way certain small objects can embed in tissue, the way your imaging protocols would miss it. She tried to tell you, and you had her supervisor threaten her job. She tried to save your daughter, and you made sure no one would ever listen to her again. Your mother, Evangeline said faintly. Who was your mother? Grace Okafor. She was a nurse here. She died last year. Cancer. The kind that the experimental treatment in your medical center could have cured. The kind she couldn't afford, even though she worked in the building where it was administered. The kind that killed her while she watched other people with money, people like you, get saved. The silence that followed was different, heavier. The kind weighted with guilt, with recognition, with the slow, dawning horror of consequences coming home to roost. Evangeline's hand went to her throat. Grace Okafor. I remember her. She was the one who, oh God. She looked at her husband. Thaddeus. The incident report. 5 years ago. There was a nurse who insisted we do an exploratory procedure. You said she was being hysterical. You said she was trying to cover for the nanny's negligence. I said, Thaddeus interrupted, and his voice had lost some of its steel, what needed to be said to protect our family from a lawsuit. You protected yourselves from the truth, Amara said. And your daughter paid for it. 5 years of silence. 5 years of doctors and specialists and treatments that never worked because none of them knew to look for what my mother saw. 5 years because you were too proud to admit a nurse might know something you didn't. Thaddeus opened his mouth. Closed it. For the first time since entering the room, he looked uncertain. He looked at his daughter, still standing there with tears on her face, still silent. He looked at his wife, whose hand was trembling against her throat. He looked at the earring, gold and pearl-less, damning in its simplicity. Show me, he said finally. Show me your proof. It's on my phone, Amara said. The one your guard is holding. Photos of the matching earring. My mother's journal entries. The testimony from Helena Kozlov. The research about ear canal foreign bodies and imaging blind spots. Everything. One of the guards held up the phone, looking at Thaddeus for instruction. Thaddeus nodded. The guard unlocked it. It was still open to the photo gallery, and started scrolling. His face changed. He showed the screen to Thaddeus, and Amara watched a billionaire's certainty crumble. He looked at the photos, the journal entries in her mother's handwriting, the anatomical diagrams with notes scribbled in the margins, the recorded interview with Helena, crying as she confessed what had really happened 5 years ago. The timeline Amara had built, matching the date of Evangeline's broken earring to the date Isadora's hearing loss began. The comparison photos showing the matching earring, the empty setting, the pearl that should have been there. The evidence was overwhelming. The evidence was irrefutable. The evidence was, in fact, exactly what Amara had said it was. Thaddeus looked up from the phone, looked at Amara, still pressed against the wall, still in handcuffs, and something in his face shifted, rearranged itself, like watching a building's foundation crack. Uncuff her, he said quietly. The guard hesitated. Sir, she's still broken. She still technically committed theft. I said uncuff her. Louder now. Harder. The guard moved fast, keys rattling, metal clicking open. Amara's wrists ached where the cuffs had bitten. She rubbed them, not taking her eyes off Thaddeus Thornfield, not trusting this, not trusting any of it. Evangeline had moved to Isadora, kneeling in front of her daughter, both hands on the girl's face. Baby, she was saying, even though Isadora couldn't hear her. Baby, is this true? Is there something in your ear? Have you been in pain this whole time? Isadora nodded, just nodded, and that simple gesture broke something in her mother's face. Evangeline pulled her daughter against her chest, rocking her, and Amara saw tears streaming down the woman's face, saw her mouth moving in what might have been apologies or prayers or just wordless grief for 5 years of suffering she'd been too blind to see. If you're feeling this, if your heart is pounding, if you need to know what happens next, then subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller right now. Because this is just the beginning. Because the surgery hasn't happened yet. Because Amara is still in that room with people who have the power to destroy her, and everything could still go wrong. If you don't subscribe, comment below, and tell me you're okay, never knowing if Isadora gets her hearing back. Tell me you're fine leaving Amara in this room without knowing if she's about to be vindicated or arrested. Go ahead, I'm waiting. Thaddeus was looking at the phone still, scrolling through the evidence with the careful attention of a man who'd built his empire on reading the fine print, on knowing when a deal was real and when it was too good to be true. But this wasn't a deal. This was his daughter's life. And slowly, methodically, he was understanding that he'd almost destroyed it through his own arrogance. "Dr. Pembroke," he said suddenly, turning to one of the guards. "Call her. Now. Tell her to get to the hospital immediately. Tell her it's an emergency. Tell her." He paused, jaw working. "Tell her we may have found something." The guard pulled out his radio, started speaking in low, urgent tones. Amara's legs felt shaky. The adrenaline that had carried her through the break-in, through the confrontation, through everything, was starting to fade, leaving her hollow and trembling. "How did you get in here?" Evangeline asked, looking up at Amara with red-rimmed eyes, her voice not accusing now, just genuinely confused. "How did you even know about the earring?" "Helena Kozlov told me," Amara said, "after I found my mother's journals, after I tracked her down and showed her the documentation. She's been carrying the guilt for 5 years. She kept the matching earring as evidence, thinking maybe someday she'd be brave enough to come forward. But she was too scared. Scared of you. Scared of losing everything. So I did it instead." "You're 12 years old," Thaddeus said, and there was something in his voice now that wasn't anger. It might have been wonder. It might have been shame. "You're a child, and you did what teams of specialists couldn't do. You solved what dozens of doctors missed." "Because I listened," Amara said simply. "Because my mother taught me to listen. Because she died knowing the truth, and no one cared enough to believe her. Because Isadora deserved better than living in silence because of her pride." The words hung there, accusation and truth tangled together, and Thaddeus Thornfield, billionaire, owner of hospitals, man who built an empire on being right, had no response. "What do you say when a 12-year-old proves you've spent 5 years being wrong about the most important thing in your life?" "Dr. Pembroke is on her way," the guard said, lowering his radio. "ETA 15 minutes. "Good," Thaddeus said. He was still holding the phone, still looking at the evidence, like if he stared at it long enough it might change, might become less damning, might offer him some escape from the magnitude of his mistake. "We'll go to the hospital. Immediately. If there's any chance." He stopped, swallowed. "If there's any chance this is real." "It's real," Amara said. "Everything in those files is real. My mother was real. Her pain was real. Her death was real. And so is what you did to her." Evangeline flinched like she'd been slapped. Isadora was watching them all, reading lips, reading body language, understanding more than any of them probably realized. She pulled away from her mother and walked to Amara. Small steps, careful steps, and then she took Amara's hand again, the same way she had right before the guards burst in and squeezed. "Thank you," that squeeze said. "Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for being braver than all the adults in my life. Thank you for seeing me when everyone else only saw money and reputation and pride." Amara squeezed back. "If this is true," Thaddeus said, and his voice had changed entirely now, gone from commanding to something closer to broken. "If you're right and there's been something in her ear all this time, if we've let her suffer because we were too." He couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't say the word. Arrogant. Proud. Blind. All of it true. All of it damning. "The police," he said instead, turning to the guards. "Cancel the call." "Sir, they're already en route." "I said cancel it." He pulled out his phone, made a call himself, spoke in clipped tones to someone about a misunderstanding, about a situation resolved, about no need for law enforcement. The kind of call that only men with his kind of power could make, where police responded like employees instead of authority. When he hung up, he looked at Amara. Really looked at her. "You said your father works here?" "At my hospital." "He's a janitor," Amara said, lifting her chin. "He works nights. He's probably cleaning the executive offices right now. The ones you only see when they're already perfect." Something flickered across Thaddeus's face. Shame, maybe. Recognition of his own blindness. "And he doesn't know you're here? He thinks I'm home sleeping. He's going to kill me when he finds out. Assuming you don't press charges and get there first." The attempt at levity fell flat. No one laughed. Evangeline was crying silently now, still kneeling on the floor, still watching her daughter. Isadora was still holding Amara's hand. The guards were standing awkwardly, unsure what to do now that the narrative had flipped, now that the thief was maybe a hero and the victims were maybe villains. "I'm not pressing charges," Thaddeus said finally. "Obviously, if what you're saying is true, and God help me, I think it is, then you've done more for my daughter than anyone else in her life." He paused, seemed to age 5 years in 5 seconds. "Including me." Amara felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. She would not cry in front of these people, would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Her mother had been strong until the end, had fought with dignity even when the system was rigged against her, and Amara would do the same. "We need to go," Evangeline said, standing, pulling Isadora with her. "Right now. If there's something in her ear, if it's been there for 5 years, we need to get it out. We need to." Her voice broke. "We need to fix this." "My father," Amara said. "He's at the hospital. He should know. He should be there." Thaddeus nodded. "We'll find him. Bring him with us. This involves him too. His wife. His daughter. His family's sacrifice." The words sounded like they hurt coming out, like admitting the humanity of his janitor cost him something. Maybe it did. They moved as a group, surreal and strange, out of the bedroom, down the hallway, past more artwork and more marble and more evidence of wealth so extreme it had become invisible to the people who lived in it. Amara's sneakers squeaked on the pristine floors. Isadora wouldn't let go of her hand. The guards followed at a distance, uncertain of their role now that everything had changed. Outside, cars were waiting. Expensive cars, the kind with drivers who lived in the garage apartments and were available 24 hours a day. Amara was ushered into one, Isadora climbing in beside her, and then they were moving through gates that opened automatically, past security that nodded them through, onto streets that were empty at this hour of the night when good people were sleeping and only the desperate or the determined were awake. Amara looked out the window at the city, sliding past, and thought about her mother. Thought about Grace Okafor, who'd seen the truth and been silenced for it, who tried to save a child and been crushed under the weight of power and money and pride, who died believing no one would ever know she'd been right. Well, Mama, Amara thought, they're about to find out. They're about to know you were right all along. They're about to understand what they took from you. From us. From everyone who loved you. The hospital rose ahead of them, all glass and steel and lights that never went out, because emergencies didn't wait for business hours, and neither did truth. The hospital lobby was empty at 2 a.m. Just fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of disinfectant and industrial floor wax, and the kind of silence that only exists in places where life and death decisions happen around the clock, but most people are too drugged or too scared to make noise. Amara had been here 1,000 times, always through the service entrance, always in the shadows, always invisible. But tonight she walked through the front doors with billionaires flanking her, and the security guard at the desk did a double take so obvious it would have been funny if everything wasn't so terrifying. "Mr. Thornfield," the guard stammered, standing up so fast his chair rolled backward. "We weren't expecting you, sir. Is everything? Where's Jeremiah Okafor?" Thaddeus cut him off. "The night janitor. I need him found and brought to the pediatric wing immediately." The guard blinked, confused by the request, by the urgency, by the fact that his boss was asking about staff he probably didn't even know existed. I'll radio the facility's supervisor." "Now," Thaddeus said, and there was steel in that single word. The guard grabbed his radio, started speaking in rapid codes that Amara had learned to translate over the months of visiting her father. Code for janitor. Code for urgent. Code for someone important wants something, and you better deliver it fast. Evangeline was holding Isadora's hand, so tight her knuckles were white. The little girl looked small in her silk nightgown and bare feet, looked fragile in a way that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with being 8 years old at 2 a.m. in a hospital where something huge and terrifying was about to happen. She kept looking at Amara like she was a lifeline, like if she looked away Amara might disappear and this might all turn out to be a dream. The elevator ride to the pediatric wing was suffocating. 7 people crammed into a space meant for hospital beds and equipment, breathing the same recycled air, avoiding each other's eyes. One of the guards had stayed downstairs to wait for Jeremiah. The other stood in the corner looking like he wished he was anywhere else. Evangeline was crying silently again, the kind of crying where you're trying so hard not to make noise that it becomes its own kind of violence. Thaddeus was staring at the elevator buttons like they held answers to questions he didn't know how to ask. And Amara was thinking about her mother. About the last time they'd been in this elevator together, back when Grace was still fighting, still believing the treatment might work, still holding on to hope with both hands even though they both knew hope was slipping away. Her mother had looked at her that day and said something Amara had never forgotten. She'd said, "Baby, if I don't make it, I need you to promise me something. Don't let them make you small. Don't let them convince you that your voice doesn't matter just because you don't have money. Sometimes the quietest people see the truth. Everyone else is too loud to hear." The elevator doors opened onto the pediatric wing, and Amara stepped out into the hallway where her mother had worked for 15 years. The walls were painted with murals of cartoon animals and rainbows, because apparently children needed to be distracted from the fact that they were sick, that their bodies were betraying them, that life wasn't fair even when you were too young to understand what fair meant. There was a nurse's station to the left, empty at this hour except for one exhausted-looking woman in scrubs who glanced up and then stood so fast she knocked over her coffee. "Mr. Thornfield," she said, shock written across her face. "Is this about Isadora? I can page Dr. Pembroke." "She's already on her way," Thaddeus said. "We need an examination room. Private. Now." The nurse moved, efficient and professional despite her confusion, leading them down the hallway to a room at the end. It was bigger than the others, the kind reserved for families who paid extra for privacy, for space to pace and worry without rubbing shoulders with people who couldn't afford the same courtesy. The lights were harsh when she flipped them on, clinical and unforgiving, turning everyone's skin a sickly shade of pale. Isadora climbed onto the examination table without being asked. She'd done this before, clearly. Dozens of times, probably. Hundreds. 5 years of appointments and tests and procedures that never found anything because no one was looking in the right place. She sat there with her legs dangling, too short to reach the floor, and watched the adults with eyes that seemed older than 8, eyes that had learned not to hope too hard because hope just meant more disappointment. Amara wanted to hug her, wanted to promise her that this time was different, that this time someone had listened, that this time the truth mattered more than pride. But she didn't. Because what if she was wrong? What if her mother's notes were incomplete? What if the pearl had moved or dissolved or somehow wasn't there anymore? What if she'd just destroyed her father's job and her own future for nothing? The door opened, and Dr. Celeste Pembroke walked in looking like someone who'd been woken from a dead sleep and told the world was ending. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, her clothes thrown on in obvious haste, her eyes still adjusting to the fluorescent lights. She was in her mid-50s, white, with wire-rimmed glasses, and the kind of face that had seen too much suffering to be surprised by anything anymore. Until tonight. Surprise flickered across her face the moment she saw the assembled crowd in her examination room. "Thaddeus," she said carefully. "Evangeline, what's going on? Your message said it was urgent, but—" She stopped when she saw Amara, looked at her for a long moment, then looked at Isadora, then back at Thaddeus with a question in her eyes. "Show her," Thaddeus said, handing over Amara's phone. "Show her everything." Dr. Pembroke took the phone, started scrolling, and Amara watched her face change. Watched skepticism become confusion, become shock, become something that looked like horror mixed with professional curiosity, mixed with the dawning realization that she'd missed something huge. Something unforgivable. "This is Grace Okafor's handwriting," Dr. Pembroke said quietly, staring at the journal entries. "I remember her. She was insistent about this case. I was the one who overruled her. I was the one who said the imaging was clear, that we didn't need to do an exploratory procedure, that she was being overly cautious." She looked up at Amara. "You're her daughter." It wasn't a question, but Amara nodded anyway. "I'm sorry," Dr. Pembroke said, and the words sounded genuine, which somehow made them worse. "I'm sorry for your loss. Your mother was an excellent nurse. One of the best we had." "She was right," Amara said. "About Isadora. About the pearl. About everything. And you didn't listen to her." Dr. Pembroke didn't argue. Couldn't argue. The evidence was right there on the phone, documented in Grace's careful handwriting, supported by research and testimony, and the kind of meticulous attention to detail that had made her such a good nurse. "If this is accurate," Dr. Pembroke said slowly, "if there is a foreign body in Isadora's ear that's been there for 5 years, the calcification alone would make it incredibly difficult to remove safely. The nerve damage could be extensive. We'd need advanced imaging first, something more sophisticated than what we used before. We'd need to map the exact position, the tissue response, Can you save her hearing?" Evangeline interrupted. Her voice was raw, desperate. "Can you fix this?" Dr. Pembroke looked at Isadora, sitting on that table with her legs swinging, touching her right ear the way Amara had seen her do 100 times, the gesture so automatic she probably didn't even know she was doing it. "I don't know," Dr. Pembroke said honestly. "The fact that she's been touching that ear suggests there's still sensation, which could mean the nerve isn't completely destroyed. But 5 years is a long time. The damage might be permanent even if we successfully remove the object. And the surgery itself carries risks. We'd be working in an incredibly delicate area with a foreign body that's embedded in tissue. One wrong move and we could make things worse." The room went quiet. The kind of quiet where everyone is thinking the same thing, but no one wants to say it out loud. That this might not work. That Amara might have risked everything for nothing. That Isadora might stay deaf forever not because the pearl is still there, but because it's been there too long. If you're still watching this, if your heart is in your throat wondering what happens next, then you need to subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller right now. Because we're about to find out if 5 years of silence can be undone. We're about to see if a 12-year-old girl's research can succeed where teams of specialists failed. We're about to learn if justice is real, or just another story we tell ourselves to feel better about how unfair the world is. If you don't subscribe, comment below, and tell me you don't care if Isadora ever hears again. Tell me you're okay leaving the story right here, right at this moment, never knowing if the surgery happens or if it works. Go ahead, I'm waiting for you to say it. The door burst open, and Jeremiah Okafor stood there in his janitor's uniform, out of breath like he'd run the whole way, confusion and fear written across his face. He saw Amara first, and the relief that flooded his expression immediately turned to panic when he saw where she was, who she was with, what was happening. "Amara!" His voice cracked on her name. "Baby, what are you doing here? What's going on?" "They said Mr. Thornfield was looking for me. They said it was urgent, I thought." He stopped when he registered the scene. His 12-year-old daughter standing in an examination room with the family who owned his employer, the family he cleaned offices for, the family who paid his salary, and could end his employment with a word. "Sir," he said, turning to Thaddeus, his body language shifting to that careful deference that Amara hated, that posture of someone who knew their place and stayed in it. "I apologize for whatever my daughter has done. She had no right to—" "Your daughter," Thaddeus interrupted, "may have just saved my child's life." Jeremiah stared at him, looked at Amara, looked at the phone in Dr. Pembroke's hands, looked at Isadora, sitting on the examination table, and slowly his face changed as understanding crept in, as pieces fell into place, as he realized what his daughter had done. "Grace's case," he said softly, "the one she wouldn't let go of, the one that ate at her until the end. You found it." "I found it," Amara confirmed. "I found Mama's journals. I found Helena Kozlov. I found the proof. And I broke into their house tonight to get the matching earring because no one would listen otherwise." "You what?" Jeremiah's voice rose. "Amara Grace Okafor, you broke into." He stopped himself, seemed to remember where he was, who was listening. Took a breath. Started over quieter. "You could have been arrested. You could have been shot. You could have." "I know, Daddy," Amara said. "But I had to. For Mama. For Isadora. For everyone who gets silenced because they don't have money or power or the right last name. I had to." Jeremiah looked at her for a long moment, and Amara saw something shift in his face. Saw pride warring with fear. Saw love fighting with anger. Saw a father realizing his daughter was braver than he'd ever been and terrified of what that might cost her. He crossed the room and pulled her into a hug, so tight she could barely breathe, and she felt him shaking. "Your mother would be so proud of you," he whispered into her hair. "So damn proud. And so scared. Just like me." Dr. Pembroke cleared her throat. We need to do the imaging now. Tonight. If there is something in Isadora's ear, every day we wait risks more damage. Mr. and Mrs. Thornfield, I need your consent to proceed with advanced imaging, and, if we find what we're looking for, emergency surgery. You have it, Evangeline said immediately. Whatever it takes, whatever the risk. We've wasted 5 years already. I'll prep the imaging suite, Dr. Pembroke said, already moving toward the door. This will take about an hour to set up properly. We need the right equipment, the right positioning. This isn't standard protocol. She left, and the room fell into awkward silence. Thaddeus was looking at Jeremiah like he was seeing him for the first time, really seeing him, processing the fact that this man in a janitor's uniform had been married to the nurse who tried to save his daughter, that this man mopped his floors while carrying the weight of injustice, that this man had raised a daughter brave enough to break into a billionaire's house for the truth. Mr. Okafor, Thaddeus said finally, I owe you an apology. Your wife. What happened to her? The way she was treated when she tried to help Isadora. The way we... He stopped. Started again. The way I dismissed her concerns. Threatened her employment. Made sure no one would take her seriously. I was protecting my family's reputation, but what I was really protecting was my own pride. And your wife paid for it. Your family paid for it. Jeremiah's jaw tightened. Amara could see him fighting with himself, fighting the urge to tell this man exactly what he thought, exactly how much damage his pride had done, exactly how it felt to watch his wife die knowing that the people she tried to help had crushed her for it. But years of swallowing anger, of staying quiet to keep his job, of knowing his place had worn grooves in his soul that were hard to climb out of. Grace believed in helping people, Jeremiah said carefully. Even when it cost her. Especially when it cost her. She would have wanted Isadora to be helped, regardless of what happened to us. That doesn't make what I did right, Thaddeus said. And it doesn't erase the fact that your wife might still be alive if... He stopped. Couldn't finish that sentence. Couldn't say out loud that if he'd paid for Grace's treatment the way he paid for everything else, if he'd valued her life the way he valued his own family's comfort, she might have survived. My wife died because cancer doesn't care about justice, Jeremiah said. But she died angry. Died knowing the truth and having no one listen. That's what you took from her. Not the years. The years were already gone. You took her dignity, her voice, her right to be believed. The words landed like punches. Evangeline was crying again, harder now. One of the guards was staring at the floor. Isadora was watching it all with those 2 old eyes, understanding through context if not through sound that something important was being said, that adults were finally admitting things they'd spent years pretending weren't true. Amara squeezed her father's hand, proud of him for saying it, proud of him for not backing down, even when backing down was safer. Her mother had died with her voice silenced, but her father was speaking now, and the words carried weight that money couldn't buy. A nurse poked her head in. Dr. Pembroke is ready for you. Imaging Suite 3. They moved as a group again. Down hallways Amara knew by heart. Past rooms where sick children slept or didn't sleep, where parents kept vigil or didn't, where life hung in balance and sometimes tipped the wrong way. The imaging suite was at the end of the hall, all steel and technology, machines that cost more than houses, equipment that could see inside bodies with impossible precision. Isadora had to lie perfectly still. They explained it to her through gestures and demonstration, since she couldn't hear the instructions. They positioned her head, adjusted the angle, told her through touch not to move even a fraction of an inch. And then everyone else had to leave the room, had to stand behind protective glass, and watch while machines hummed and clicked and captured images of the inside of an 8-year-old's ear canal with resolution, so high they could see individual cells. The waiting was excruciating. Minutes stretched like hours. Amara held her father's hand on one side and watched through the glass as technology did what human eyes couldn't, as answers formed in real time on screens that Dr. Pembroke was studying with the intensity of someone who knew lives depended on what she found. And then Dr. Pembroke went still. Just stopped moving, staring at the screen, and Amara's heart stopped too, because that stillness could mean anything. Could mean she found it. Could mean she found nothing. Could mean the imaging revealed something worse than a pearl, something that explained why Isadora's hearing never came back. Dr. Pembroke turned to look at them through the glass. And even from this distance, even through protective barriers and medical equipment and the weight of 5 years of accumulated mistakes, Amara could read her face. She found it. The pearl was there. Everything Grace Okafor had documented. Everything Helena Kozlov had confessed. Everything Amara had risked her freedom to prove was real. The pearl was there, and it had been there all along, and everyone who'd called Grace Okafor hysterical or overreacting or a liar had been wrong. Dr. Pembroke spoke into the intercom. "I need to see the parents in the control room. Now." Thaddeus and Evangeline rushed into the small space where Dr. Pembroke was pulling up images, zooming in, highlighting areas, explaining in medical terminology that Amara mostly understood from months of research. The pearl was there, embedded in tissue, calcified, positioned at an angle that standard imaging had missed, pressing against the cochlear nerve, causing inflammation, causing damage, causing 5 years of silence that never had to happen. "Can you remove it?" Evangeline's voice was shaking. "Yes," Dr. Pembroke said, "but the surgery is extremely delicate. The pearl has essentially become part of her ear anatomy. Removing it means removing calcified tissue, working around the nerve. There's significant risk of further damage. There's also a chance that even if we successfully remove it, the nerve damage is already permanent. 5 years is a long time. The brain has adapted to deafness. Restoring hearing, if we can even do it, will require extensive therapy. But there's a chance," Thaddeus said. "A chance she could hear again." "Yes," Dr. Pembroke said. "There's a chance." And that was all anyone needed to hear. The surgery was scheduled for dawn. 6 hours away. 6 hours for the surgical team to assemble, for equipment to be prepped, for consent forms to be signed and risks to be explained, and everyone to understand that what they were about to attempt had never been done quite this way before. 6 hours for doubt to creep in, for fear to take hold, for everyone to second-guess whether this was brave or reckless. But before we get to that operating room, before we see whether Isadora Thornfield ever hears again, you need to understand how Amara got here. Because the journey to breaking into a billionaire's mansion doesn't start the night you climb through the window. It starts months before, with grief and anger and a desperate need to finish what someone you loved couldn't complete. It starts in a hospital library with dust and old journals and the ghost of your mother whispering that some truths are worth dying for. 3 months earlier, Amara had been a different girl. Not different in the ways that mattered. She was still brilliant and observant and fierce, but different in that she hadn't yet decided to become the kind of person who breaks laws to save lives. She was still the kind of girl who did her homework on time, who helped her father without complaint, who kept her head down and her voice quiet, because that's what you did when you were 12 and black and poor and living in a world that punished people like you for taking up too much space. School let out at 3:15. By 3:45, Amara was at Thornfield Medical Center, walking through the service entrance with a key card her father had given her, telling herself she was just here to help him, to bring him the dinner she'd cooked, to keep him company during the long night shifts that paid the rent but were slowly grinding him down into someone who looked older than 45, who moved like his bones hurt, who smiled less and less as the months without Grace stretched on. The hospital cafeteria was closed by the time she arrived, so she'd sit in the break room with her homework spread out on the table while her father mopped floors and emptied trash cans and cleaned bathrooms that people who made 10 times the salary used and never thought about. Sometimes she'd help him push the heavy cart full of cleaning supplies. Sometimes she'd hold the door while he maneuvered equipment through hallways designed by people who'd never had to actually clean them. Mostly she'd just be there, a presence that reminded him he wasn't alone, that Grace's death hadn't taken everything, that he still had someone to come home to. But Amara wasn't just doing homework in that break room. She was reading medical journals, nursing textbooks, research papers that she pulled from the hospital library when no one was looking. Her mother had been a nurse for 15 years, and in those 15 years she taught Amara to love learning the same way she loved it, with a hunger that couldn't be satisfied, with questions that led to more questions, with the understanding that knowledge was the one thing no one could take from you even when they took everything else. The hospital library was small, barely more than a closet with shelves, tucked away on the 3rd floor where most people forgot it existed. In the age of digital everything, nobody used physical medical journals anymore. They gathered dust. They waited, and Amara found them like treasure, pulling down volumes about pediatric care and audiology and neurology, reading with the kind of focus that made hours disappear. She told herself she was just curious, just learning, just honoring her mother's memory by understanding the work Grace had done. But that was a lie, and she knew it. She was searching for something, some piece of her mother that the cancer hadn't taken, some proof that Grace Okafor had mattered, had made a difference, had left something behind besides grief and medical bills they were still paying off. And then one Tuesday in October, 2 months after she'd started her research habit, Amara found it. The hospital had been clearing out belongings from deceased staff members. Policy required they hold items for 1 year, then donate or dispose of them. Grace had been dead 13 months. Her locker had been emptied, her personal effects cataloged and offered to next of kin, which was just Jeremiah and Amara, and they'd taken what mattered, the photos and jewelry, and the stethoscope Grace had used for 15 years. What they hadn't taken, what they didn't know existed, was sitting in a donation box in the library waiting to be shipped to Goodwill. Amara almost missed it. She was reaching for a journal on otic pathology when her hand brushed against the cardboard box on the bottom shelf, and something about it made her pause, made her look, made her read the label that said, Okafor, G. Deceased Staff Donation. Her heart stopped. She knelt down, pulled the box toward her, opened it with hands that were shaking because this was her mother. These were pieces of Grace that had been sitting here for months while Amara walked past without knowing, without feeling the pull, without understanding that sometimes the answers you need are hiding in places you've looked 100 times before. There were scrubs, worn soft from washing. A coffee mug that said, World's Best Nurse, that someone had given Grace as a joke gift. A sweater with a small hole in the elbow that Grace had never bothered to fix because she was too busy fixing other people. And beneath it all, wrapped in a plastic bag like someone had known they were important but hadn't known who to give them to, were journals. 5 of them. Spiral-bound notebooks with covers that were falling apart, pages filled with Grace's handwriting, that distinctive mix of print and cursive that happened when you were writing fast, when thoughts came quicker than your hand could capture them. Amara pulled them out with reverence, with hunger, with the desperate hope that maybe her mother's voice wasn't completely gone. Maybe some part of her lived here in ink and paper and observations that mattered to no one but her. She opened the first journal and started reading. The entries were clinical at first. Patient notes, observations, the kind of documentation nurses did every day, chronicling symptoms and treatments and responses. But Grace had added something more. Personal reflections, questions about care quality, concerns about patients who were falling through cracks, worries about the gap between the medicine wealthy patients received and what everyone else got. It was ethical thinking, moral reasoning, the kind of writing someone did when they couldn't stop seeing injustice and couldn't stop believing it could be fixed. Amara read for hours, forgot about homework, forgot about her father working floors above her, forgot about everything except her mother's voice speaking from pages written years ago when Amara was small, when Grace was alive and fighting battles Amara hadn't known existed. And then she found it. The entry dated October 17th, 5 years ago. Patient IT, age 3, presented with sudden bilateral hearing loss. Parents report no trauma, no illness, no obvious cause. Child nonverbal since onset 3 days ago. Physical examination revealed child touching right ear repeatedly. When asked if there was pain, child nodded. Parents dismissed this as child seeking attention. Amara's breath caught. IT Isadora Thornfield. It had to be. She kept reading, pulse pounding in her ears. Requested permission to examine ear canal more thoroughly. Mother, Evangeline Thornfield, became agitated. Said child had already been examined by specialists. I explained that sometimes foreign bodies can be missed, especially in young children who can't communicate clearly. Father, Thaddeus Thornfield, interrupted. Said I was implying their family was negligent, that we were looking for reasons to blame them, that if their daughter was deaf, it certainly wasn't because they'd failed to supervise her properly. I pressed the issue, told them I'd seen cases where small objects, beads, pearls, even food items could lodge in ear canals and cause sudden hearing loss. Father became angry, told me I was overstepping, that Dr. Pembroke was the attending physician and I should defer to her expertise. Left to consult with Dr. Pembroke privately. During this time, I observed the nanny, Helena Kozlov in the hallway. She was crying. When I approached, she looked terrified. I asked if she knew what happened to Isadora. She opened her mouth to speak, then saw Mr. Thornfield returning and went silent. But I saw her eyes dart to Mrs. Thornfield's jewelry, expensive earrings she was wearing. One was missing a pearl. Grace's handwriting got messier here, like she was writing faster, urgency bleeding through. Returned to examination room. Suggested to Dr. Pembroke that we do exploratory procedure. Check for foreign body despite clean imaging. Dr. Pembroke dismissed my concerns. Said imaging was definitive. That pursuing invasive procedures based on speculation was not appropriate. Mr. Thornfield agreed. Said I was being hysterical. Mrs. Thornfield asked if I was accusing them of negligence. Dr. Pembroke told me to step back. Let the specialist handle it. Later that day, called to supervisor's office. Formal reprimand filed. Told I'd overstepped boundaries, caused distress to wealthy donors, questioned the judgment of senior physicians. Warned that another incident would result in termination. Mr. Thornfield personally called my supervisor to complain. Said I'd implied his family was responsible for their daughter's condition. Threatened to pull hospital funding if I wasn't disciplined. I know what I saw. I know that child has something in her ear. I know the nanny knows what it is. I know the imaging was done at the wrong angle, wrong resolution. I know if they just listen, if they just look properly, they could save that little girl's hearing. But no one listens to nurses, especially not nurses questioning powerful families, especially not when millions of dollars in donations hang in the balance. I'm documenting this because I need it written down. I need proof that I tried. I need someone to know that when that child grows up deaf, when she wonders why no one saved her, it's not because no one knew. It's because the people who knew didn't have enough power to make it matter. If something happens to me, if this comes back somehow, find Helena Kozlov. She knows. She's too scared to speak, but she knows. The journal entry ended there. But Grace had added something in the margin, written later in different ink, the handwriting shakier like her hands were trembling. They're threatening my job again. Different patient. Same problem. I spoke up about treatment disparities. They called me disruptive. I think the stress is making me sick. I think carrying all these silenced truths is eating me alive from the inside. Amara closed the journal, pressing it against her chest, tears streaming down her face in the empty library. Her mother had known, had tried to save Isadora Thornfield 5 years ago, had been silenced and threatened and punished for being right. And the stress of it, the constant battle of seeing injustice and being powerless to stop it, how that contributed to the cancer? Had carrying the weight of all those silenced truths literally made her mother sick? She would never know, could never prove it. But it didn't matter because the truth was sitting right here in this journal, documented in her mother's handwriting, proof that Grace Okafor had tried to do the right thing and been destroyed for it. If you're feeling this rage, if you understand what it's like to watch good people get crushed by systems designed to protect the powerful, then you need to subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller right now. Because what Amara does next will either vindicate her mother or destroy her father's life. Because the decision she's about to make will change everything. If you don't subscribe, comment below and tell me that nurses like Grace don't deserve justice. Tell me that their silenced voices should stay silent forever. Say it with your whole chest. Amara sat in that library until midnight, reading every entry in all 5 journals, mapping out her mother's battle against institutional indifference, tracking the pattern of Grace speaking up and being slapped down, watching her mother's hope slowly erode as she realized that truth didn't matter as much as power, that being right wasn't enough when the people you were right about could destroy your career with a phone call. When her father found her, she was surrounded by open journals, her face swollen from crying, anger and grief twisting together into something that felt like lightning in her chest. "Baby girl," Jeremiah said softly, kneeling beside her. "What are you doing down here? I've been looking everywhere for you." Amara handed him the journal, pointed to the entry about patient IT, watched as her father read, as his face changed, as understanding and horror and rage flickered across his expression. "Oh, Grace," he whispered. You tried so hard." "She was right, Daddy," Amara said. "Isadora Thornfield is deaf because of a pearl that's been stuck in her ear for 5 years. And Mama knew. Mama tried to help. And they threatened her job. They called her hysterical. They made sure no one would listen. Jeremiah was quiet for a long time, just holding the journal, staring at his dead wife's handwriting. Finally he said, "What are you thinking, Amara? I can see the wheels turning. I know that look. That's your mama's look, the one she got when she'd made up her mind about something, and nothing could stop her." "I'm thinking I need to find Helena Kozlov," Amara said. "I'm thinking I need to get proof. I'm thinking I need to finish what Mama started." "No." The word came out hard, final. Jeremiah closed the journal and looked at his daughter with fear in his eyes. "Absolutely not. You heard what happened to your mother. These people destroy anyone who crosses them. I can't lose you too. I won't lose you too. Daddy." "No, Amara. Listen to me. We need this job. We're still paying off your mama's medical bills. We're barely making rent. If I lose this position, because my daughter is harassing the family that owns the hospital, we lose everything. Our apartment, our stability, everything your mama fought for. I won't risk that. I can't risk that. So we just let Isadora suffer." Amara's voice rose. "We just let Mama's death mean nothing. We just accept that rich people get to silence truth whenever it's inconvenient." "Yes." Jeremiah's voice cracked. "Yes, that's exactly what we do. Because that's how we survive. That's how people like us have always survived. We keep our heads down, we do our jobs, we don't make waves no matter how unjust things are. Your mother forgot that. Your mother thought truth mattered more than survival. And look where it got her." The words hung between them, harsh and horrible and true in a way that made Amara want to scream. Her father wasn't wrong. Her mother had died, fighting battles she couldn't win, had exhausted herself trying to fix a broken system, had given everything to a job that replaced her 2 weeks after her funeral like she'd never existed at all. But she'd also been right. And being right had to mean something. Had to count for something. Had to matter more than fear. "I'm sorry, Daddy," Amara said quietly. "I'm sorry for what I'm about to do. But I have to. For Mama. For Isadora. For everyone who gets silenced because they don't have power. Amara, please. If Mama couldn't save her, I will." She took the journals and walked out of the library, leaving her father kneeling on the floor, surrounded by dust and regret, and the ghost of a woman who'd fought too hard against people who couldn't lose. For the next 6 weeks, Amara became obsessed. Every lunch period, she was in the library. Every evening, she was researching instead of sleeping. She taught herself ear anatomy from medical textbooks written for doctors. She learned about foreign body extraction procedures. She researched imaging blind spots, understanding how certain angles and positions could make objects invisible to standard scans. She read case studies about pearls and beads and small metal objects that embedded in tissue, that calcified, that became part of the body while slowly destroying it. She learned that human ear canals weren't straight, they curved at an angle that changed with age. She learned that in a 3-year-old, this angle created natural blind spots that inexperienced technicians might miss. She learned that pearls, being organic material coated in nacre, could calcify over time, forming a shell of calcium deposits that would look like natural tissue on low-resolution imaging. She learned that cochlear nerves were incredibly fragile, that even small amounts of pressure over long periods could cause permanent damage, but that sometimes, if you remove the pressure source, function could return. She learned that her mother had been absolutely, irrefutably correct. And she learned something else. She learned that being correct wasn't enough. That knowledge without power was just frustration. That truth without the ability to make people listen was just noise. She needed proof, needed evidence, so overwhelming that even the Thornfield family couldn't dismiss it. Needed something that would force them to look at their daughter's ear the way Grace had wanted them to look 5 years ago. She needed that matching earring. She needed Helena Kozlov. She needed to become the kind of girl who broke rules, who took risks, who understood that sometimes justice required crossing lines you weren't supposed to cross. So she tracked down Helena Kozlov, which was harder than it should have been because Helena had changed jobs 3 times since being fired, had moved twice, had essentially tried to disappear from anything connected to the Thornfield family. But Amara was patient. She was methodical. She was her mother's daughter, and Grace had taught her that when something mattered, you didn't give up just because it was hard. She found Helena working at a dry cleaners in a neighborhood that was slowly being gentrified, where rent was rising and people like Helena were being squeezed out toward the margins. She was in her 50s, Russian accent still thick, hands rough from years of manual labor, eyes haunted by something that had happened 5 years ago and never stopped happening in her nightmares. Amara walked into that dry cleaner's after school one day with her mother's journal in her backpack and a determination that scared even her. Subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller if you believe in finishing what good people started. If you think Amara deserves to complete her mother's mission. If you don't subscribe, you're basically saying that people like Grace, nurses who try to do the right thing, don't matter. Comment below if that's really who you are. Comment and tell me that silenced voices should stay silent, that injustice should go unchallenged, that 12-year-old girls should know their place. Go ahead, I'm listening. The bell above the door chimed when Amara walked into the dry cleaners, and the chemical smell of cleaning solvents hit her immediately. Sharp, acrid, the kind of smell that got into your lungs and stayed there. The shop was narrow, cramped, with racks of plastic wrap clothes hanging so close together you had to turn sideways to walk between them. Behind the counter stood a woman with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun, hands that looked like they'd seen too much hard work, and eyes that went wide the moment she saw Amara. Not wide like surprise, wide like fear. Helena Kozlov knew. Somehow, without a word being spoken, she knew why a 12-year-old black girl was walking into her shop after school hours. Knew it wasn't about dry cleaning. Knew it was about the past, about secrets, about the thing she'd been running from for 5 years. "We're closed," Helena said quickly, her accent thick, her hands already moving to the door behind the counter like she might bolt. "Come back tomorrow." "I'm not here for cleaning," Amara said. She moved deeper into the shop, letting the door close behind her with another chime that sounded too cheerful for what was about to happen. "I'm here about Isadora Thornfield." Helena's face went white. Actually white, like someone had drained all the blood out of it. Her hand gripped the edge of the counter, so hard her knuckles turned the color of bone. "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know that family. Please leave." "You were her nanny," Amara said, pulling out her phone, pulling up the photo she'd found in public records, a Society page article from 6 years ago showing the Thornfield family at some charity event, Helena visible in the background holding a toddler Isadora. "You worked for them for 3 years. You were there the day Isadora went deaf. You know what happened." "No." Helena was shaking her head, backing away. "No, I signed papers. Non-disclosure. I can't talk about them. They'll sue me. They'll destroy me. I have family. I have grandchildren. I can't." "My mother was Grace Okafor," Amara interrupted, and those words stopped Helena cold. She was the nurse who examined Isadora, the one who tried to tell them what you saw, the one they threatened into silence. Helena's breath caught. Her eyes filled with tears, so fast it was like watching a dam break. "Grace," she whispered. "The nurse who believed me. The one who—" She stopped. Swallowed. "I heard she died. Cancer. I wanted to go to the funeral. I wanted to tell her I was sorry for not speaking up, for letting her fight alone. But I was too afraid." "She documented everything," Amara said, pulling her mother's journal from her backpack. "She wrote down what she saw. What you saw. She knew Isadora had something in her ear. She knew you knew what it was. And she was punished for trying to help. She held out the journal. She died carrying the weight of that silence. She died knowing that little girl was suffering, and no one would listen. And now I'm here to finish what she started." Helena stared at the journal like it might bite her. Her hands were trembling. "You shouldn't be here. You don't know what these people are capable of. They have lawyers. They have money. They have power. They made me sign papers saying if I ever spoke about what happened, they would deport my family. My daughter, my son-in-law, my grandchildren. All of us. They would ruin us. They would make sure we had nothing. They already made sure Isadora has nothing," Amara said. "She's been deaf for 5 years. 5 years because you were too scared to speak up. 5 years because my mother was silenced. 5 years because powerful people care more about their reputation than their own daughter's suffering." The words were harsh, harsher than Amara intended, but they landed like punches and Helena flinched with each one. Tears were streaming down her face now, carving tracks through makeup that was trying to hide how tired she was, how worn down, how much carrying this secret had cost her. "You think I don't know that?" Helena's voice cracked. You think I don't see that little girl's face every night when I try to sleep? You think I don't hate myself for choosing my family over hers? I was terrified. I still am terrified. They told me if I ever spoke, they would make sure everyone knew I was a liar. That I was trying to extort them. That I broke the earring and was making up stories to avoid responsibility. Who would believe me? A nanny, an immigrant, against a billionaire family. I believe you, Amara said quietly. My mother believed you. And right now, in this moment, Isadora Thornfield is still deaf because you're too scared to tell the truth. Helena's face crumpled. She sank down onto the stool behind the counter like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. Her whole body was shaking. It was my fault, she whispered. I should have been watching her more carefully. She was playing in Evangeline's room. I was downstairs. I heard Evangeline scream. When I ran up, Isadora was laughing, holding this broken earring. The pearl was gone. Evangeline was furious, screaming at me about how that earring cost $50,000. How could I let a child near her jewelry? How irresponsible I was. I tried to find the pearl. We looked everywhere. Under the bed, in the carpet, everywhere. And then Isadora started touching her ear. Started crying. And I knew she'd put it in her ear. Children do that. They put things in their ears, their noses. They think it's funny. I told Evangeline. I said we need to take her to the hospital right away. But Evangeline was so angry about the earring. She said I was making excuses, that I probably lost the pearl while cleaning and was trying to blame a 3-year-old. Amara felt ice forming in her chest. She didn't take Isadora to the hospital immediately. Not until the next day, Helena said. Not until Isadora stopped responding to sounds. Then they panicked. Then they rushed her to doctors. By then it was too late. The pearl had moved deeper. They did imaging, but it didn't show anything. The doctors said there was no foreign body. Thaddeus said I was lying. Said I was trying to cover up my negligence by inventing a story about a pearl. He called immigration. He said if I didn't drop it, if I didn't admit I broke the earring, and there was never a pearl in Isadora's ear, he would make sure my visa was revoked. Make sure my family was deported. Make sure I never worked with children again. He had lawyers draw up papers, non-disclosure agreements, liability releases, papers that said I admitted to breaking the earring through carelessness, and that there was no foreign body involved in Isadora's hearing loss. And you signed them, Amara said. I signed them. Helena's voice rose, desperate, defensive. I had 3 days to decide between telling the truth and losing everything. Between saving a little girl who might not even be saved, the doctor said the imaging was clear, and protecting my own family. What would you have done? What would anyone have done when faced with that choice? The question hung in the air between them, and Amara didn't have an answer because she didn't know. Couldn't know. Had never been forced to choose between truth and survival, between doing right and protecting the people she loved. But her mother had made that choice, had chosen truth even when it cost her. And where had it gotten her? A grave and a daughter left behind, and a journal full of documentation that no one had ever read until now. My mother made the same choice you did, Amara said finally. She had to choose between speaking up and keeping her job. She chose to back down, to stay quiet, to let them silence her. And I think it killed her. Not the cancer, not directly, but the weight of carrying all those silenced truths. The stress of watching injustice and being powerless to stop it. I think it ate her alive from the inside out. Helena was crying harder now, shoulders shaking. I kept the earring, she said suddenly. The broken one. The one missing its pearl. I kept it as evidence. I thought maybe someday I would be brave enough to come forward. Maybe when my grandchildren were grown, when they couldn't be used against me anymore. Maybe when enough time had passed that the Thornfields couldn't hurt me anymore. I kept it for 5 years. Carried it with me through every job change, every move. Kept it in a box in my closet like proof that I wasn't crazy, that it really happened, that I was telling the truth even though no one believed me. Amara's heart was pounding. You still have it? The matching earring. Helena nodded slowly, stood up, went to the back room, and Amara could hear her moving things, opening something, the sound of metal on metal. When she came back, she was holding a small jewelry box, the kind you get from expensive stores. Her hands were shaking as she opened it. Inside, Nestled in white silk was an earring, gold and delicate and missing a pearl from its setting. The twin to the one Amara had seen in the photos on society pages, the one Evangeline Thornfield had worn to galas and fundraisers back before her daughter went deaf, back before everything changed. I photographed it from every angle, Helena said. I documented the date. I wrote down everything that happened. I have it all stored in a safe deposit box because I was paranoid they would break into my apartment and destroy the evidence. I thought about going to the media, thought about hiring a lawyer, thought about 100 different ways to make this right. But every time I got close, I remembered what Thaddeus said, how he would destroy me, how he had connections in immigration, in law enforcement, in every system I might turn to for help. How people like me don't win against people like him. You're right, Amara said. People like you don't win against people like him. But people like me? We don't have anything to lose. Helena looked at her, really looked at her, seeing maybe for the first time how young she was, how small, how impossible it seemed that this child thought she could take on a billionaire family. What are you going to do? I'm going to prove my mother was right, Amara said. I'm going to get evidence that the pearl in Isadora's ear matches this earring. I'm going to make them look. I'm going to make them listen. I'm going to do what you and my mother couldn't do. How? Helena's voice was barely a whisper. How can you possibly? The Thornfield family is hosting a charity gala next Friday, Amara said. She'd done her research, had spent weeks learning their schedules, their habits, their patterns. The house will be full of people. Security will be focused on the guests. I'm going to get in. I'm going to find Evangeline's bedroom. I'm going to find her jewelry box. And I'm going to take photos proving this pearl belongs to that missing piece. Helena's face went pale again. You're talking about breaking into their home. About trespassing. About theft. You're 12 years old. If you get caught. If I get caught, I get arrested, Amara finished. My father loses his job. We lose our apartment. Everything we have left disappears. I know the risks, but I also know that if I don't do this, Isadora stays deaf forever. My mother's death means nothing, and you carry that guilt for the rest of your life. If you're rooting for Amara, if you want to see her pull this off, subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller now. Because the next chapter is the heist, and it's going to be intense. If you don't subscribe, comment and tell me why you'd rather protect billionaires than a 12-year-old girl risking everything for the truth. Go ahead, I'm listening. The shop was quiet except for the hum of the industrial steamers in the back, except for Helena's ragged breathing, except for the sound of two people standing at a crossroads trying to decide if redemption was worth the risk. You're insane, Helena said finally. You're a child, and you're talking about committing crimes against one of the most powerful families in the city. They will destroy you. They will destroy your father. They will make sure you pay for this for the rest of your life. Maybe, Amara said. But maybe I succeed. Maybe I get the evidence. Maybe I force them to look at their daughter's ear properly for the first time in 5 years. Maybe I save her. Maybe I prove my mother was right. Maybe I give you back the 5 years you've spent hating yourself. Maybe I make all of this mean something. Helena stared at her for a long moment, tears still streaming down her face, and Amara watched her wrestle with herself, watched fear fight against guilt, watched self-preservation battle with the desperate need to make things right. Finally, Helena reached into the jewelry box and pulled out the earring, held it in her palm like it weighed 1,000 pounds. If you're caught with this, Helena said slowly, it ties you to me. It proves premeditation. It makes everything worse. I know, Amara said. If you're caught, I'll deny everything. I'll say you stole it from me. I'll protect my family first. I know, Amara said again. You could go to juvenile detention. You could end up with a criminal record. You could ruin your entire future over this. I know. Amara held out her hand. But I'm doing it anyway. Because some things are worth the risk. Because my mother taught me that truth matters even when it's dangerous. Because Isadora Thornfield deserves to hear her mother's voice. Because you deserve to stop carrying this guilt. Because powerful people need to learn they can't silence everyone forever. Helena looked at the earring in her palm. Looked at Amara's outstretched hand. Looked at the choice she was about to make, knowing it was the same choice she'd failed to make 5 years ago, knowing this was her second chance, even if it came through a 12-year-old girl who had more courage than any adult in the story. She placed the earring in Amara's hand. The metal was warm from being held so tight. The empty setting where the pearl should have been looked like an accusation. Amara closed her fingers around it, feeling the weight of evidence, the weight of truth, the weight of her mother's silenced voice demanding to be heard. "There's more," Helena said quietly. She went back to the back room and returned with a folder, worn and bent at the edges. Photos of Isadora from before, playing with jewelry, photos of the broken earring from the day it happened. My written statement. Everything I documented but was too afraid to use. Take it all. If you're going to do this, do it right. Make sure they can't deny it. Make sure they can't claim you made it up. Amara took the folder with shaking hands. Opened it. Saw photo after photo of a laughing 3-year-old Isadora, blonde curls wild, holding up her mother's jewelry like treasures. Saw the broken earring photographed from multiple angles. Saw Helena's handwritten account of that day, dated, detailed, damning in its precision. "Why didn't you come forward with this?" Amara whispered. "You had all this evidence. You could have." "Evidence doesn't matter without power," Helena said bitterly. "I learned that the hard way. They have lawyers who would shred this. They have PR people who would destroy my credibility. They have connections who would make sure no media outlet touched the story. I'm nobody. They're everybody. That's how the world works." "That's how it used to work," Amara said. "But things are changing. People are starting to listen to nobodies. People are starting to question everybody's. And I'm going to make so much noise they can't ignore it." Helena smiled, sad and small. "You're so much like your mother. She had that same fire, that same stubborn belief that justice was possible if you just fought hard enough. I hope you're right. I hope the world has changed. I hope nobodies like us finally matter." "We do matter," Amara said. "We've always mattered. We just needed someone brave enough to prove it." She tucked the earring and folder into her backpack, careful, reverential, understanding she was now carrying the weight of 2 women's silenced truths. Her mother's and Helena's, both women who had seen injustice and tried to stop it and been crushed under the heel of power. Both women who deserved better than to die or live with guilt because they weren't rich enough to be believed. "The gala is Friday," Amara said. 7 p.m. I've been studying the house layout from public records and architectural photos. I know where Evangeline's bedroom is. I know where she keeps her jewelry. I know the security patterns. I have it all planned out. "You're going in alone?" Helena asked. "I have to. Anyone else becomes an accomplice. Anyone else gets hurt when this goes wrong." "When?" Helena repeated. "Not if." "When?" Amara confirmed. "Because even if I'm successful, even if I get the evidence and prove everything, they'll still try to destroy me. They'll say I'm a thief. They'll say I broke in with criminal intent. They'll use every legal weapon they have to make me the villain and themselves the victims. That's what powerful people do when you challenge them. They flip the narrative. They make the truth teller into the criminal." Helena was quiet for a moment, then said something that sent chills down Amara's spine. "Your mother said the same thing, right before they threatened her the final time. She said the only way to beat people like the Thornfields is to make the truth so loud they can't spin it, to have evidence so overwhelming they can't deny it, to force them to choose between their pride and their child. She believed that eventually every parent chooses their child." Helena paused. She was wrong. They chose pride. They chose reputation. They chose silence. Don't make the same mistake she did. Don't believe that love automatically wins against ego. "I don't believe love wins," Amara said. "I believe evidence wins. And I'm going to get so much evidence they have no choice but to look at what they've done." She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "Helena, when this is over, when the truth comes out, they're going to know you gave me this earring. They're going to know you helped. Are you ready for that?" Helena straightened her shoulders. For the first time since Amara walked in, she looked less like someone running from the past and more like someone ready to face it. "I've spent 5 years being a coward. I think it's time to be brave, even if it's too late, even if it costs me everything. Some things are worth losing everything for." Amara nodded, understood, walked out of that dry cleaner's with evidence burning a hole in her backpack, and a plan forming in her mind that was probably going to destroy her life but might, just might, save Isadora Thornfield's. The next 5 days were the longest of Amara's life. She went to school like normal, helped her father like normal, did homework like normal. But every moment she wasn't actively engaged in something else. She was planning, studying, preparing. She memorized the mansion layout. She knew every door, every window, every security camera placement. She studied the guest list for the gala that had been published in society pages. She learned the names of the catering company, the valet service, the security firm. She found out which entrances would be most crowded, which hallways would be least monitored during the party. She learned that the Thornfield mansion had a service entrance that catering staff used. She learned that during large events, security was focused on protecting guests and preventing outsiders from getting in the front, not on monitoring the back, where legitimate workers moved in and out. She learned that Evangeline's bedroom was on the second floor, east wing, with a door that was usually locked but could be picked if you knew how. And she learned how to pick locks. YouTube was an education in itself. Her father noticed something was different. Noticed she was distracted, distant, staying up too late with her phone glowing under the covers. He asked her twice if something was wrong. She lied both times. Said she was fine. Said school was just stressful. Watched guilt eat at him because he believed her lies, because he was so exhausted from working double shifts that he didn't have the energy to push harder, to see past her performance to the truth underneath. She hated lying to him, hated knowing that what she was about to do might destroy everything he'd worked for. But she couldn't stop, couldn't turn back, because her mother was dead, and Isadora was deaf, and Helena was drowning in guilt, and somewhere in all of that suffering was a truth that demanded to be heard. Friday arrived like Judgment Day. Amara got dressed for school like normal, kissed her father goodbye like normal, told him she loved him like it might be the last time, and he didn't notice the weight in those words because he was already late for his shift. At school, she couldn't focus. Teachers' voices were background noise. Lessons were meaningless. All she could think about was tonight, about the moment she would cross the line from good girl to criminal, about the choice she was making and all the ways it could go wrong. Her best friend Zainab asked her at lunch if she was okay. Said she seemed weird. Amara wanted to tell her. Wanted to confess everything. Wanted to say that by tomorrow she might be in juvenile detention, and could Zainab please look after her father if that happened. But she didn't. Couldn't. Because telling Zainab made her an accessory, and Amara wasn't dragging anyone else into this fire. After school, she went home. Changed clothes. Black jeans. Dark hoodie. Sneakers that wouldn't make noise. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the girl staring back. This wasn't who she'd been 3 months ago. 3 months ago, she was invisible. Careful. Safe. Now she was about to become a thief. No, not a thief. A truth-teller. The distinction mattered. She left her apartment at 6 p.m. Her father was already at work. She locked the door behind her, taking one last look at the home she might never return to, at the life she might be leaving behind. Then she walked to the bus stop and headed toward the wealthiest neighborhood in the city, toward a mansion where powerful people were gathering to congratulate themselves for their charity while their daughter suffered in silence. The gala was already in full swing when she arrived. Cars lined the street. Valets were running back and forth. Women in expensive gowns and men in tuxedos were walking through the front entrance into a world Amara had only ever seen from the outside. She didn't go through the front. She went around back, where catering vans were parked, where staff in black and white uniforms were rushing trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, where no one looked twice at a young girl in dark clothes because everyone was too busy doing their jobs. She slipped through the service entrance like she belonged there, like she had every right to be there. Confidence was camouflage. Her mother had taught her that. If you walked like you were supposed to be somewhere, most people assumed you were. The kitchen was chaos. Chefs barking orders. Servers grabbing trays. Heat and noise, and the smell of expensive food. Amara grabbed an empty tray from a stack, held it like she was working, and walked out of the kitchen into the mansion proper. And that's where everything changed. That's where she walked into wealth, so extreme it stopped feeling real. That's where she saw crystal chandeliers and marble floors, and art on the walls that cost more than her entire apartment building. That's where she understood, viscerally, the gap between her world and theirs. That's where the story you already know begins. They called her a thief. They said she came to steal. But what she took from that room wasn't what anyone expected, and it saved a little girl's life. The mansion was obscene. That was the only word for it. Obscene in its excess, in its casual display of wealth that could have fed neighborhoods, housed families, saved lives. Amara moved through the ground floor with her empty tray held like a shield, and everywhere she looked was another reminder that some people lived in a different universe entirely. The chandelier in the main hall probably cost more than her father would make in a lifetime. The paintings on the walls were originals. She recognized some from her mother's art books, pieces that belonged in museums but instead decorated a hallway where drunk rich people spilled champagne and didn't bother to clean it up. The flower arrangements alone, massive explosions of roses and orchids that would die in 3 days, represented more money than Amara's family spent on groceries in 6 months. And these people were celebrating charity, patting themselves on back for their generosity, congratulating each other on caring about the less fortunate while wearing watches that cost more than cars and jewelry that glittered like captured stars. Amara wanted to scream, wanted to grab them by their designer lapels and silk gowns and ask them if they knew what it was like to skip meals so you could afford school supplies. If they understood that charity shouldn't be necessary in a world where this much wealth existed in single homes. If they ever looked at their own excess and felt even a flicker of shame. But she didn't scream. She moved through them like a ghost, invisible in the way poor people always were to the wealthy. Just another servant whose face they wouldn't remember, whose name they wouldn't learn, whose humanity they could ignore because acknowledging it might make them uncomfortable. The string quartet was playing something classical and beautiful in the corner. Vivaldi maybe. Amara wasn't sure. The music mixed with the sound of laughter, of clinking glasses, of conversations about vacation homes and stock portfolios, and which private school was best for little Sebastian or Madison, or whatever pretentious name they'd given their children. Nobody was talking about Isadora. Nobody was mentioning that the daughter of this house was upstairs in her room, locked in silence, suffering while they celebrated. Amara spotted her father across the room, and her heart clenched. Jeremiah was carrying a tray of champagne flutes, moving carefully through the crowd, his face set in that neutral expression he wore at work, the one that said he was present but not really there, that he could serve these people without having to acknowledge the massive gap between their lives and his. He hadn't wanted to work this event, had tried to get someone to cover his shift, but overtime was overtime, and they needed every dollar they could get. So here he was, serving champagne to people who probably didn't even taste it, who drank because it was expensive and therefore good. She ducked behind a pillar before he could see her. Couldn't let him know she was here. Couldn't give him the opportunity to stop her or, worse, to try to help her and become an accomplice to what she was about to do. This was her crime, her risk, her choice. He would find out eventually, but by then it would be too late to change anything. The crowd was thick on the ground floor, everyone clustering around the buffet tables that were loaded with food that would be thrown away at the end of the night. Amara saw lobster and caviar and tiny pastries that probably took hours to make and would be consumed in seconds. Her stomach growled. She'd skipped dinner, too nervous to eat, and now the smell of all this food was making her dizzy. Or maybe that was the fear. Hard to tell. She needed to get upstairs. The private wing, where family lived, where guests weren't allowed, where Evangeline's bedroom held the jewelry box that contained the evidence Amara needed. But there were servers going up and down the main staircase, security guards posted at strategic points, cameras in corners recording everything. She couldn't just walk up the stairs. Too obvious. Too risky. So she went looking for the service stairs. Every mansion had them, the hidden staircases where servants could move between floors without being seen by the people who lived there. She found them behind a door marked "Staff only near the kitchen," narrow and dim, the kind of space that was purely functional, no marble or art or expensive anything because nobody who mattered would ever see it. She climbed quickly, quietly, her heart hammering so hard she was sure someone would hear it. The stairs opened onto a hallway on the second floor, and Amara paused at the door, listening for voices, for footsteps, for any sign that someone was nearby. Nothing. Just the muffled sound of the party below, music and laughter floating up through expensive floorboards. She opened the door and stepped into the private wing of the Thornfield mansion. The hallway was carpeted, thick and plush, the kind that absorb sound and cost a fortune to maintain. There were more paintings here, more evidence of wealth, but these were different. These were personal. Family photos in expensive frames. Isadora as a baby. Isadora as a toddler. Isadora smiling and laughing and hearing. Isadora before everything changed. Amara walked past them, each one a knife to the gut, each one a reminder of what had been stolen from that little girl. At the end of the hallway was a set of double doors, ornate and imposing. The master bedroom. Evangeline and Thaddeus's private space. The place where this all began. The doors were locked. Of course they were locked. Rich people locked everything. Protected everything. Trusted nothing and no one. Amara pulled out the tools she'd practiced with, the thin metal strips that YouTube had taught her could manipulate lock mechanisms if you were patient and precise. Her hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries, and every second felt like an hour. Every tiny sound amplified in her mind until she was sure guards were rushing toward her, sure she was about to be caught. The lock clicked open. Amara pushed through the doors into a bedroom that was larger than her entire apartment. King-size bed with silk sheets, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured grounds. A sitting area with furniture that looked like it belonged in a palace. Closets that were probably bigger than her bedroom. And everywhere, that same casual display of wealth that made her teeth ache. But she wasn't here to catalog their excess. She was here for evidence. She found the jewelry box on Evangeline's vanity, an elaborate mahogany thing with multiple drawers and compartments. It wasn't locked. Why would it be? These people had never imagined someone like Amara would get this far. Had never considered that their walls and locks and security might be breached by a 12-year-old with nothing to lose and everything to prove. Amara opened the box and her breath caught. Jewelry. So much jewelry. Necklaces dripping with diamonds. Bracelets studded with emeralds. Rings with stones, so large they looked fake but probably cost more than houses. This wasn't jewelry you wore. This was jewelry you owned. Collected. Displayed. This was wealth for the sake of wealth, beauty for the sake of possession. And there, in the third compartment, nestled in black velvet, was the earring. She knew it immediately. Recognized it from the photos Helena had given her from the society pages she'd studied. Gold filigree work, delicate and intricate, with an empty setting where a pearl should have been. The match to the earring in her backpack. The proof that 5 years ago, Evangeline Thornfield had lost a pearl and her daughter had lost her hearing. Amara pulled out her phone with trembling hands. Started taking photos. Close-ups of the earring from every angle. Wide shots showing it in the jewelry box among all the other expensive pieces. Photos that proved this wasn't fabricated, wasn't staged, was real evidence in a real place. Then she pulled Helena's earring from her backpack, set it next to its twin. They were identical. Same gold work, same delicate setting, same empty space where a pearl had once been attached. She took more photos. The 2 earrings side by side. Proof of the match. Proof that they were a set. Proof that one pearl was missing and had been missing for exactly 5 years. Subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller right now if you're holding your breath. If you want to know if she gets caught. If you want to see justice happen. If you don't hit that button, comment below and explain why you don't care if Amara ends up in juvenile detention for trying to save a little girl. Explain that to me. But photos weren't enough. Amara knew that even as she was taking them, photos could be disputed, called fake, claimed to be manipulated. The Thornfields had lawyers who would shred photo evidence, would question authenticity, would find ways to create doubt. What she needed was physical proof. What she needed was the actual earring. What doctors needed was the ability to compare this earring to the pearl in Isadora's ear, to prove beyond any doubt that they matched. Which meant taking it. Which meant theft. The line between truth-teller and criminal was about to disappear entirely. Amara's hand hovered over the earring, her mind racing through consequences. If she took it, she crossed a line she couldn't uncross. If she took it, she became exactly what they would call her. A thief who broke into a home and stole valuable jewelry. The fact that she needed it to save Isadora wouldn't matter in court. Intent didn't erase action. Motivation didn't negate crime. But if she didn't take it, if she left with just photos, would anyone believe her? Would doctors accept photo evidence alone? Would the Thornfields agree to examine their daughter based on pictures a 12-year-old took during a break-in? No. She knew the answer. They would deny. They would dismiss. They would do what powerful people always did when confronted with uncomfortable truths. They would protect themselves and their reputation, and Isadora would stay deaf. Amara picked up the earring. The metal was cool in her palm. Light. Delicate. Worth $50,000 according to Helena, though that seemed impossible for something so small. But then again, everything about this world seemed impossible to someone who counted pennies and recycled clothes and understood that wealth wasn't measured in what you had but in what you didn't have to worry about. She was about to pocket it when she heard something that made her blood turn to ice. Voices. In the hallway. Getting closer. Amara spun around, looking for somewhere to hide. The closet was too far. Under the bed was too obvious. Behind the curtains would show her outline. There was nowhere to go, no time to escape, and the voices were right outside the door now, and she was trapped. The door started to open. Amara did the only thing she could think of. She ducked behind the vanity, pressing herself against the wall, making herself as small as possible, praying that whoever was coming in wouldn't look this direction, wouldn't notice anything out of place, wouldn't see the jewelry box open, or the earring missing, or the girl who absolutely should not be here. I told you, we only have 5 minutes, a male voice said. Not Thaddeus. Younger. Urgent. She'll notice if I'm gone too long. Then we need to make them count, a female voice responded. Breathy. Seductive. Not Evangeline. Amara risked a glance around the edge of the vanity, and her stomach dropped. Sebastian Fairchild, the family lawyer, was backing through the door with a woman in a catering uniform pressed against him. They were kissing, hands everywhere, completely absorbed in each other and whatever illicit affair they were conducting in his employer's bedroom. This was bad. This was so incredibly bad. They were between her and the door. She couldn't leave without them seeing her. Couldn't stay without being discovered. And any second now they were going to move toward the bed. And if they did, if they came any closer, they would see her crouched behind the vanity like a criminal. Which she was. Would she become the moment she picked up that earring? Sebastian pushed the woman against the wall, just feet from where Amara was hiding. She could hear their breathing, heavy and fast. Could hear the rustle of clothing. Could hear whispered words that she absolutely did not want to hear. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing herself invisible, willing them to finish quickly and leave before she was discovered. Wait, the woman said suddenly. Did you hear something? Amara stopped breathing. It's just the party, Sebastian said, annoyed at the interruption. Nobody comes up here during events. We're fine. Are you sure? Because I thought I heard. Jennifer, we have 5 minutes. Do you want to waste them being paranoid? Jennifer, the catering manager. Amara remembered seeing her in the kitchen, barking orders, looking stressed. Apparently, she was also having an affair with the family lawyer. Rich people drama. Any other time, Amara might have found it funny. Right now, it was just terrifying. They went back to kissing, and Amara used the sound to slowly, carefully, inch backward. There was another door behind the vanity, probably leading to the bathroom or closet. If she could reach it, if she could slip through without making noise, maybe she could hide until they left. She was halfway there when her foot hit something. A shoe. Expensive, designer, forgotten on the floor. It skittered across the hardwood with a sound that might as well have been a gunshot. Sebastian and Jennifer froze. Someone's in here, Jennifer hissed. Impossible, Sebastian said, but he was already moving, already looking around, already about to discover Amara crouched behind furniture like the intruder she was. Amara made a split-second decision. She couldn't get caught by them. Couldn't let Sebastian Fairchild, family lawyer, be the one to find her. He would call security immediately, would have her arrested, would make sure this ended in the worst possible way. So she ran, burst out from behind the vanity, sprinted for the door, heard Jennifer scream and Sebastian shout, "Hey," but she didn't stop, didn't look back, just ran into the hallway with the earring clutched in her fist and her heart trying to explode out of her chest. Behind her, Sebastian was yelling for security. His voice carried through the hallway, alerting guards, alerting staff, alerting everyone that something was wrong. Amara could hear footsteps pounding up the main stairs. could hear radios crackling, could hear her window of escape slamming shut. She turned a corner and almost collided with someone. Isadora. The little girl was standing in the hallway in her nightgown, blonde hair messy from sleep, eyes wide with surprise. She'd probably been woken by the noise, had come out of her room to see what was happening. And now she was staring at Amara, at the girl she'd met at the hospital months ago, at the friend who'd drawn pictures with her and learned to communicate without words. Amara waited for Isadora to scream, to alert the guards, to point at her and condemn her. Every instinct said the girl would choose her family, would choose safety, would do what any child would do when they found a stranger in their home. But Isadora didn't scream. She looked at Amara, looked at the earring in Amara's hand, looked back at Amara's face, and smiled, not a happy smile, not an innocent smile, a knowing smile, the smile of a child who understood more than adults gave her credit for, the smile of someone who'd been watching, listening through reading lips and body language, understanding that something important was happening even if she couldn't hear the words. Isadora pointed down the hall, toward a different staircase, a different way out. Then she stepped back into her room and quietly closed the door, leaving Amara standing in the hallway with guards approaching and evidence in her hand and a little girl who'd just chosen truth over loyalty. Amara ran. Amara ran down the hallway Isadora had pointed to, her sneakers silent on expensive carpet, the earring digging into her palm where she'd clenched her fist so tight her nails were cutting skin. Behind her, Sebastian's voice was still echoing through the mansion, calling for security, calling for someone to stop the intruder, and she could hear doors opening, people emerging from rooms to see what the commotion was about, the party downstairs going quiet as words spread that something was wrong. The staircase Isadora had shown her was narrower than the main one, servant stairs probably, the kind that led down to the kitchen area where staff could move without being seen. Amara took the steps two at a time, nearly slipping on polished wood, catching herself on the railing, and not caring about the noise anymore because stealth didn't matter when half the mansion knew someone was running through their private wing. She burst out into a hallway near the kitchen and immediately regretted it. Staff were everywhere, servers grabbing fresh trays, kitchen workers plating food, and all of them turned to look at her, at this girl in dark clothes running like her life depended on it, and she saw the moment they processed that something was very wrong. "Stop her!" someone shouted. A security guard at the far end of the hallway, radio already at his mouth, already calling for backup. Amara pivoted and ran the other direction, back toward the main house, because going outside meant being trapped in the grounds with nowhere to hide, meant being caught in open space with security converging. At least inside there were rooms, hallways, places to potentially lose them. At least inside there was a chance, however small, that she could find her way back to the party, blend into the crowd, somehow escape this nightmare she'd walked into. The guard was chasing her now. She could hear his heavy footsteps, his breathing, the jangle of equipment on his belt. He was bigger, stronger, faster. It was only a matter of time before he caught her. But time was all she had, so she used it, running through the mansion like a rat in a maze, turning corners randomly, hoping for luck, praying for a miracle. She found herself in a grand sitting room, all leather furniture and oil paintings, and a fireplace big enough to stand in. There were two exits. She chose the one on the left and immediately realized her mistake. It led to a conservatory, all glass walls and nowhere to hide, and worse, it dead-ended. No way out except back the way she came. The guard appeared in the doorway behind her, blocking her exit, breathing hard but grinning because he knew he had her cornered. "End of the line, kid," he said. "Make this easy on yourself. Put down whatever you took and come quietly." Amara looked around desperately. The conservatory was full of plants, expensive orchids and tropical things that probably required specialized care. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the grounds outside, manicured perfection that she couldn't reach. No doors, no exits, just glass and plants and a guard between her and freedom. "I said put it down!" the guard repeated, moving closer. "Whatever you've got in your hand, drop it. Now." Amara looked at her clenched fist. At the earring she'd risked everything to take. At the evidence that could save Isadora or condemn her, depending on who got to tell the story first. She thought about her mother. About Grace Okafor, who'd been silenced for trying to help. About Helena Kozlov, who'd spent 5 years drowning in guilt. About Isadora locked in silence because adults had chosen pride over truth. She thought about dropping the earring, about surrendering, about making this easy. And then she thought, no, not after everything, not after coming this far. I can't give it to you, Amara said. I need it. A little girl needs it. You don't understand. I understand you broke into this house and stole something, the guard said. That's all I need to understand. Now drop it before I make you drop it. He moved forward, and Amara did the only thing she could think of. She ran at him, not away, toward, caught him off guard with her audacity, ducked under his reaching arms, and slipped past him back into the sitting room. She heard him curse, heard him turn to chase her, heard his radio crackling with reports of her position and direction. But she bought herself seconds, and seconds were something. She ran back into the hallway, saw more guards converging from both directions, realized she was surrounded. The mansion had become a trap. Every exit blocked, every escape route cut off. They were hurting her, she realized, pushing her toward a central point where they could corner her properly. She ended up back near the main entrance, near the grand staircase where the party had been happening. The music had stopped. The guests were crowding the doorways, trying to see what was happening, murmuring to each other about security and intruders. And wasn't this exciting? Like her capture was entertainment, like her desperation was a show put on for their amusement. And that's when the alarm started. Not the security alarm from earlier. This was different, louder, more insistent. The kind of alarm that meant something valuable had been taken, that meant the house's inventory system had detected a missing item, that meant there was no more question about whether she'd stolen something. The system knew, had catalogued the missing earring, had marked her as a thief in electronic certainty. Guards surrounded her. 6 of them now, forming a circle, cutting off any possible escape. And behind them, pushing through the crowd of gawking guests, was Thaddeus Thornfield. His face was twisted in rage, so pure it was almost beautiful in its intensity. This was a man who'd built an empire on control, who'd never been challenged in his own home, who was watching a 12-year-old girl shatter his illusion of security. "Don't move," he said, and his voice carried that same ice-cold authority she'd heard in the bedroom. "Don't even breathe wrong." The guards moved in, grabbed her arms, spun her around and pushed her against the wall hard enough that her cheeks scraped against expensive wallpaper. Hands patted her down, professional and impersonal. Found her phone, found the earring, held both up like trophies. "Got it, sir," one guard said. "And looks like she took photos, too. We'll need to check what's on the phone." Thaddeus took the earring, held it up to the light, and something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by cold fury. "You broke into my home," he said, each word precise and cutting. "You violated our privacy. You stole from us. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Amara tried to speak, but one of the guards had his hand on the back of her neck, keeping her face pressed against the wall, keeping her silent. She could hear the crowd murmuring, could feel their eyes on her, could sense their judgment. Rich people looking at a poor girl and seeing exactly what they expected to see. A criminal, a thief, someone who didn't know her place. "Get her father," Thaddeus said. "He works here, doesn't he? Jeremiah Okafor. Find him. Bring him here. Now." No. God, no. Not her father. Amara struggled against the guard's grip, but it was useless. She was 12 and small and powerless against men trained to restrain people. All she could do was wait and watch as someone went to find her father, to drag him into this disaster, to destroy his life along with hers. Evangeline appeared at the top of the stairs, wrapped in her silk and diamonds, looking down at the scene with horror and confusion. "Thaddeus, what's happening? Why are the alarms?" She stopped when she saw Amara, saw the guards restraining her, saw the earring in her husband's hand. "Is that my jewelry? Did she break in and steal my jewelry?" "Apparently," Thaddeus said. His voice was getting louder now, performing for the crowd, making sure everyone witnessed his righteous anger. "This is Jeremiah Okafor's daughter, the janitor's child. We gave that man work. We gave his family a chance. And this is how they repay us, by sending their daughter to rob us." "I didn't come here to rob you," Amara managed to say, her voice muffled against the wall. "I came to save." "Quiet," the guard said, pressing harder on her neck. "No, Amara found strength somewhere deep, the same place her mother had found it when she tried to speak up, the same place Helena had found it when she'd finally given up the earring. No, I won't be quiet. Not anymore. Not like my mother. Not like everyone else you've silenced. Your mother! Evangeline descended the stairs, her face cold. Your mother was the nurse who tried to blame us for our daughter's condition, who tried to claim we'd been negligent, who nearly cost us our reputation. My mother was right. Amara shouted it. Didn't care any more about the consequences, about the crowd, about the guards. Grace Okafor was right. She tried to tell you 5 years ago that Isadora had something in her ear. She tried to save your daughter, and you destroyed her for it. The crowd went silent. Even the guards seemed uncertain now, looking at each other, not sure if they should silence her or let her speak. That's absurd, Thaddeus said, but there was something in his voice now, something less certain. Our daughter has been examined by the best specialists in the world, multiple times. If there was something in her ear, they would have found it. They didn't look in the right place, Amara said. The guard had loosened his grip slightly, and she used the space to turn her head, to look at Thaddeus directly. That earring you're holding, it's missing a pearl. It's been missing a pearl for 5 years, since the day Isadora went deaf. And that pearl is still in her ear. It's been there this whole time. Embedded, calcified, invisible to standard imaging, destroying her hearing one day at a time. Evangeline's hand went to her throat. That's impossible. We took her to specialists. We did everything. You did everything except listen to the people who tried to help you, Amara interrupted. My mother. Your nanny Helena. Anyone who suggested you might be wrong. You had my mother threatened. You had Helena deported. You made sure no one would ever question you. And your daughter paid for it. If you need to know what happens in that next moment, subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller right now. If you want to see Amara vindicated or destroyed, you need to be here. If you don't subscribe, drop a comment telling me you're okay with never knowing if she goes to jail or becomes a hero. Tell me you're fine with that cliffhanger forever. This is ridiculous, Thaddeus said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. He was looking at the earring in his hand, really looking at it now, seeing the empty setting where a pearl should be. You're saying Isadora has been deaf for 5 years because of a missing pearl? That's preposterous. The imaging was clear. The doctor said what you paid them to say. Amara shot back. They said what kept your donations coming. They said what protected your reputation. But they didn't say the truth. Where's my daughter? Evangeline's voice was shaking. Where's Isadora? If this girl broke in, if she was upstairs. She's fine, Amara said. She's in her room. She saw me. She let me go. Because she knows. She's known something was wrong for 5 years. She's been touching her ear constantly. She's been in pain. And none of you noticed because you were too busy protecting yourselves. The crowd was murmuring now, louder, the gossip machine churning. This was going to be in Society pages tomorrow. Scandal in the Thornfield mansion. Accusations and drama, and all the things rich people pretended didn't happen in their pristine worlds. And then Jeremiah appeared, pushed through the crowd by a guard, his face gray with shock. He saw Amara pressed against the wall, saw the guards holding her, saw his employer holding evidence of what she'd done. Amara, he breathed. Baby girl, what did you do? I'm sorry, Daddy, Amara said, and tears were streaming down her face now, hot and unstoppable. I'm so sorry. I had to. For Mama. I had to finish what she started. Your daughter, Thaddeus said, turning to Jeremiah with cold precision, broke into my home, stole from us, violated our trust. You're fired, effective immediately, and I will see her prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. She's going to juvenile detention. She's going to have a record that follows her forever. She's destroyed both your lives tonight. Jeremiah looked like he might collapse, like the weight of everything, his job, their apartment, their future, was crushing him in real time. Please, he said, and the word came out broken. Please, Mr. Thornfield. She's just a child. She's been grieving her mother. She hasn't been thinking clearly. Don't do this. I'll pay for the earring. I'll work for free. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't destroy her life. She destroyed it herself, Thaddeus said, the moment she chose to break in here. I didn't come here to steal. Amara shouted again, struggling against the guards. I came here to prove my mother was right. I have evidence. I have photos. I have Helena Kozlov's testimony. I have my mother's journal. Everything is on my phone. Everything you need to see that you've let your daughter suffer for 5 years because you were too proud to admit a nurse might know something you didn't. Let me see the phone, Evangeline said suddenly. She was at the bottom of the stairs now, close enough that Amara could see her perfectly made-up face was cracking, tears threatening to ruin mascara that probably cost more than groceries. Don't, Thaddeus said. She's a thief. She's making things up too. Let me see the phone, Evangeline repeated, harder this time. If there's even a chance she's telling the truth, if there's any possibility that Isadora. She couldn't finish, couldn't say out loud that they might have missed something, that their daughter's deafness might be their fault. The guard holding Amara's phone looked at Thaddeus for permission. Thaddeus hesitated, clearly torn between his pride and the tiny seed of doubt that had been planted. Finally, he nodded. The guard handed the phone to Evangeline. She started scrolling. Amara watched her face change as she saw the photos. The matching earring in the jewelry box. The empty setting. The side-by-side comparison. Helena's written testimony. Grace's journal entries in handwriting that Evangeline must have recognized because they'd probably fired her personally. Oh my God, Evangeline whispered. Oh my God, this is my earring. The one that broke. I thought Helena had lost the pearl while cleaning. I thought. She looked at her husband. Thaddeus, look at this. Look at these photos. I don't need to look at. Look at them. Evangeline's voice cracked. This is our daughter we're talking about. If there's any chance she's been suffering because we didn't listen, because we were too proud to. She was interrupted by a voice from the crowd. Let me see. Everyone turned. Dr. Celeste Pembroke was pushing through the guests, still in her evening gown, looking like she'd come straight from the party to the commotion. She was one of the guests, Amara realized, had been invited to this charity gala, was witnessing the whole disaster. Dr. Pembroke, Thaddeus said, relief flooding his face. Thank God. You can settle this. Tell them this is impossible. Tell them Isadora has been thoroughly examined. Tell them. Let me see the evidence, Dr. Pembroke said. Her voice was clinical, professional, the voice of someone who'd learned not to jump to conclusions. Evangeline handed over the phone. Dr. Pembroke scrolled through the photos. Her expression was unreadable at first, professional mask firmly in place. But Amara watched her eyes, watched them widen slightly, watched doubt creep in, watched certainty crack. She got to Grace's journal entries, started reading. Her face went pale. These are Grace Okafor's notes, she said quietly. I remember this case. I remember overruling her. I remember. She looked up at Amara. You're Grace's daughter. Yes, Amara said. And my mother was right. She tried to tell you. She tried to save Isadora. And you all chose to protect yourselves instead. Dr. Pembroke looked at the photos again. At the matching earrings. At the medical notes. At the timeline that matched perfectly with Isadora's hearing loss. Her hand was trembling. Oh my God, she said, and her voice had lost all its professional distance. We missed it. We all missed it. The room exploded. The explosion wasn't literal. It was worse. It was the sound of 100 wealthy people all talking at once, their voices rising in shock and speculation, and the kind of salacious gossip that would fuel society pages for months. It was Evangeline's sharp intake of breath that turned into a sob. It was Thaddeus's face going from rage to something that looked like the ground had disappeared beneath him. It was Jeremiah's strangled sound of relief, mixed with terror because his daughter might be right, but she was still in handcuffs in a billionaire's mansion. And it was Amara, pressed against the wall by guards who suddenly didn't know if they were restraining a criminal or a hero. What do you mean you missed it? Thaddeus's voice cut through the noise like a knife. He grabbed Dr. Pembroke's arm, the phone still in her other hand, his face twisted with something between hope and horror. What are you saying? Are you telling me this child is right? That my daughter has been deaf for 5 years because of a pearl? Dr. Pembroke looked at him, and for the first time since Amara had seen her at the hospital, the doctor's professional composure was completely gone. She looked devastated, guilty, human in a way that doctors usually weren't allowed to be. I'm saying it's possible, she said carefully. I'm saying the evidence this girl has compiled is compelling enough that we need to do another examination immediately. Advanced imaging. Different protocols than what we used before. You said the imaging was clear, Evangeline said, and her voice was shaking so badly the words barely made sense. You said there was nothing there. You said the nurse, Grace Okafor, you said she was being hysterical. You told us to ignore her. I was wrong, Dr. Pembroke said, and those 3 words seemed to cost her everything. I was wrong to dismiss Grace. I was wrong to trust imaging that might have missed something positioned at the wrong angle. I was wrong to let institutional authority override clinical suspicion. She looked at Amara, still held against the wall. Your mother tried to save my patient, and I silenced her because I was too arrogant to consider that a nurse might see something I missed. The crowd was getting louder, pressing closer, everyone wanting to hear, wanting to see, wanting to be part of whatever scandal was unfolding. Amara could see phones being pulled out, could see people recording, could see this moment being captured and uploaded and spread across social media before the night was over. The Thornfield family's private shame was about to become very public. We need to get Isadora to the hospital, Dr. Pembroke said urgently. Right now. If there is a foreign body in her ear, if it's been there for 5 years, every minute we wait risks more permanent damage. But you said the imaging was clear, Thaddeus repeated, like if he said it enough times it would still be true, like he could go back to 5 minutes ago when his world made sense and his daughter was deaf because of mysterious medical reasons and not because he'd been too proud to listen to a nurse. I said previous imaging was clear, Dr. Pembroke corrected. But looking at these photos, reading Grace's notes about positioning and angle, understanding that certain organic materials can calcify and blend with tissue, I realized we might have been looking in the wrong way. We need different imaging, higher resolution, different angles. We need to check what we should have checked 5 years ago. This is insane, Sebastian Fairchild said, pushing forward through the crowd. He looked rumpled, his affair with the catering manager probably forgotten in the chaos. You're taking the word of a child who broke into this house and stole jewelry? She could have fabricated all of this. The photos could be staged. The testimony could be lies. You're going to append everything based on a criminal's claims. I'm going to examine my patient based on compelling evidence, Dr. Pembroke shot back. Which is what I should have done 5 years ago when a skilled nurse brought me the same concerns. She's a thief, Sebastian insisted. She committed a crime. Multiple crimes. Breaking and entering. Trespassing. Theft. She needs to be arrested and prosecuted, not rewarded for. She's a child who might have just solved what a dozen specialists couldn't, Dr. Pembroke interrupted. And right now, I don't care about the legality of how she got this information. I care about whether my patient has been suffering for 5 years because I was too arrogant to listen. Thaddeus was staring at the earring still in his hand. Just staring at it like if he looked hard enough it would tell him what to do, would give him an answer that didn't involve admitting he'd been wrong, that he'd silence people who try to help, that his daughter's deafness might be his fault. If we do this examination, he said slowly, if we find that she's right, that there is something in Isadora's ear, then we remove it, Dr. Pembroke said. Immediately. Emergency surgery. The longer it stays there, the more damage it does. And if the surgery fails, Evangeline's voice was barely a whisper. If we try to remove it and something goes wrong, we could make it worse. We could hurt her more. We could, Dr. Pembroke agreed. But leaving it there guarantees continued damage. At least this way, there's a chance. A chance she could hear again. A chance we could fix what should have been fixed 5 years ago. Amara watched this conversation happen, watched these powerful people wrestle with the consequences of their choices, and felt something shift in the room. The power dynamic was changing. She was still in handcuffs, still technically a criminal, still at their mercy. But she also had something they didn't. She had the truth. And truth, it turned out, had its own kind of power. Let her go, Thaddeus said suddenly. The guards looked at him in confusion. Sir, let her go, he repeated. Take off the handcuffs. She's not going anywhere. She wants to see if she's right. She wants to watch us examine Isadora. She's not going to run. The guards hesitated, then obeyed. The cuffs clicked open, and Amara's wrists ached where the metal had bitten. She rubbed them, not taking her eyes off Thaddeus, not trusting this, not understanding what was happening. "You broke into my home," Thaddeus said, looking at her directly for the first time since the confrontation began. "You stole from us. You committed crimes that I could have you prosecuted for. Do you understand that?" "Yes," Amara said. "And you did it anyway. Because you thought you were right. Because you thought you could save my daughter when no one else could." "Yes," Amara said again. Thaddeus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that shocked everyone in the room, including himself. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most foolish. I haven't decided which yet. Can we decide after you let a doctor look at your daughter's ear?" Amara said, and the words came out sharper than she intended, but she was so tired, so scared, so done with rich people taking forever to do the right thing. Someone in the crowd laughed. Actually laughed. A sharp, shocked sound that said they couldn't believe a 12-year-old was talking to Thaddeus Thornfield like that. But Thaddeus didn't get angry. He just nodded. "Get Isadora," he said to Evangeline. "Wake her up. Tell her. Tell her we're going to the hospital. Tell her." He stopped. Couldn't finish. Because how do you tell your deaf daughter that you might have missed the reason she's deaf for 5 years? How do you admit that to a child? Evangeline disappeared upstairs, moving fast, her heels clicking on marble. The crowd started to disperse, the show over, or maybe just moving to the next venue. Because of course, they were all going to follow to the hospital. Of course, this was entertainment. Of course, other people's suffering was gossip fodder. Subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller if you need to know if this surgery succeeds. If you care whether Isadora hears again. If you want to see what happens to Amara after all of this. If you don't subscribe, comment, and tell me you're the kind of person who walks away before the ending. Say it with your whole chest. Jeremiah appeared at Amara's side, pulled her into a hug so tight she couldn't breathe. He was shaking. Actually shaking. "You're crazy," he whispered into her hair. "You're absolutely crazy. You could have been arrested. You could have been shot. You could have destroyed everything." "I know, Daddy," Amara said. "But I had to. For Mama." "I know," Jeremiah said. "I know you did. And I'm so proud of you. And so terrified. And so angry. And so..." He pulled back, looked at her face, tears streaming down his own. "Your mother would be losing her mind right now. Pride and fear fighting each other. Just like me." "Mr. Okafor," Thaddeus said, and Jeremiah immediately straightened, that automatic deference kicking in despite everything. "You're not fired." Jeremiah blinked. "Sir." "You're not fired," Thaddeus repeated. "Your daughter might have just saved mine. I'm not firing the father of the girl who..." He stopped, swallowed. "You're not fired. We'll discuss the rest later." It wasn't an apology. Wasn't even close. But it was something. An acknowledgement that maybe, possibly, the power dynamic wasn't as fixed as everyone had thought. Evangeline came back downstairs with Isadora, the little girl still in her nightgown, rubbing sleep from her eyes, confused about why everyone was in her house, why they were all staring at her. She saw Amara and her face lit up. Signed something that Amara didn't understand but could guess meant friend or you're here, or maybe just hello. "We're going to the hospital, baby," Evangeline said. Even though Isadora couldn't hear her, even though it was habit, the automatic thing you said to a child, even when the words were useless. She looked at Amara. "Can you explain to her? You two can communicate somehow." Amara nodded, knelt down in front of Isadora, pulled out her phone and started drawing on a notes app. Simple pictures. Hospital. Doctor. Ear. Question mark. Isadora watched, her face serious, understanding dawning in those blue eyes that had seen too much for 8 years old. She pointed to her ear, signed something emphatic, then looked at her parents with an expression that was part hope and part accusation, like she'd known something was wrong all along and was angry it had taken them 5 years to listen. The trip to the hospital was surreal. A convoy of expensive cars, the Thornfield family in their town car, Dr. Pembroke in her own vehicle, already on the phone arranging for imaging technicians to be called in, for equipment to be prepared, for the best surgical team to be on standby. Amara and her father in another car, driven by a security guard who kept looking at them in the rearview mirror like he couldn't figure out if he was transporting heroes or criminals. And behind them, a trail of society people who couldn't resist following the drama to its conclusion. Thornfield Medical Center at 3 a.m. was eerily quiet. The emergency room had its usual chaos, but the rest of the hospital was in that dead-of-night stillness where only essential staff moved through hallways and most patients were drugged into sleep. But when Thaddeus Thornfield walked through the doors, when he brought his entourage and his drama and his demands, the hospital woke up. Administrators appeared. Department heads were called. The best imaging technicians were pulled from sleep and told to come in immediately. Money talked. Power demanded. And the machinery of expensive healthcare sprang into action because a billionaire needed something. They set up in the pediatric imaging suite, the same one as Adora had been in dozens of times before. But this time was different. This time they were looking for something specific. This time they had Amara's hypothesis about angle and positioning. This time they had Grace Okafor's notes about where to look. Isadora had to lie perfectly still while machines hummed and clicked around her. She was scared. Amara could see it in her face, in the way her hands clenched. So Amara asked if she could stay in the room, and surprisingly, Dr. Pembroke agreed. Said sometimes having a familiar presence helped pediatric patients stay calm. So Amara sat on the floor next to the imaging table, held Isadora's hand, and watched the little girl's face while technology searched for proof that everything Amara had risked was real. The imaging took 45 minutes. 45 minutes of different angles, different resolutions, different protocols. 45 minutes of Amara's heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. 45 minutes of knowing that if they found nothing, she was just a thief who'd broken into a mansion and stolen jewelry and made up an elaborate story to justify it. Dr. Pembroke was in the control room with the technicians, watching screens that showed things Amara couldn't see from where she sat. Thaddeus and Evangeline were in there too, pressed against the glass, watching their daughter like if they looked away she might disappear. And then Dr. Pembroke went still. That same stillness from before. That frozen moment when someone sees something that changes everything. She stood up, walked to the window between the control room and the imaging suite. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking. She spoke into the intercom. "I need the parents in the control room. Now." The urgency in her voice made Amara's blood run cold. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. They'd found it, but it was worse than they thought. Or they hadn't found it and Amara was wrong. Or Thaddeus and Evangeline were staring at the screens. Amara could see them from her angle on the floor, could see their faces illuminated by the glow of medical imaging, could see horror dawn across their expressions. "Oh my God!" Evangeline's voice came through the intercom, not meant for broadcast but captured anyway. "Oh my God, it's really there. It's been there the whole time." Amara felt relief, so intense it made her dizzy. She'd been right. Her mother had been right. Helena had been right. 5 years of being dismissed and silenced and threatened, and they'd all been right. But the relief lasted exactly 3 seconds before Dr. Pembroke said something that turned it to ice. "The pearl is lodged directly against the cochlear nerve," she said, her voice clinical, professional, the way doctors got when they had to deliver bad news. "It's embedded in tissue. Calcified. The imaging shows significant inflammation and what appears to be nerve damage. The position is complicated. Can you remove it?" Thaddeus asked, and his voice had lost all its authority, all its power. He just sounded like a scared father. "I can remove it," Dr. Pembroke said, "but I need you to understand the risks. The pearl has been there for 5 years. It's essentially become part of her ear anatomy. Removing it means removing calcified tissue, working in an incredibly delicate area. One wrong move, and I could sever the nerve entirely. Could cause more damage than the pearl itself has caused. And if you don't remove it," Evangeline asked, "if we don't remove it, the damage will continue. The inflammation will worsen. She could lose what little hearing function might be salvageable. She could develop infections, complications. It needs to come out. But even if you successfully remove it," Thaddeus said slowly, understanding dawning in his voice, "the damage might already be permanent." "Yes," Dr. Pembroke said. 5 years is a long time. The nerve has been compressed, irritated, damaged consistently. Even if we remove the pearl, even if the surgery is perfectly successful, there's a significant chance she'll never hear again. The damage is too extensive. The brain has adapted to deafness. We might restore the physical pathway for sound, but the neural pathways might be too far gone. The room was silent except for the hum of machines. You're saying, Evangeline's voice was breaking, that even if we do everything right, even if the surgery succeeds, our daughter might stay deaf forever because we waited too long. Yes, Dr. Pembroke said. That's what I'm saying. Amara felt like she'd been punched. She thought finding the pearl would solve everything. Thought proving she was right would mean Isadora could hear again. Thought truth equaled healing. But medicine didn't work that way. Time didn't work that way. Some damage couldn't be undone, no matter how brave you were, no matter how right you were, no matter how much you risked. But there's a chance, Amara said, surprising herself, her voice carrying through the imaging suite. There's a chance she could hear again. That's better than no chance at all. Dr. Pembroke looked at her through the glass. Yes, she said. There's a chance. Nerve tissue can surprise us sometimes. Children's brains are plastic, adaptable. I've seen recoveries that shouldn't have been possible. But I need the parents to understand what they're agreeing to. This surgery is high risk. The recovery will be long. The outcome is uncertain. When? Thaddeus asked. When can you do it? Dawn, Dr. Pembroke said. 4 hours from now. I need time to assemble the right team. To prepare. To plan the approach. This isn't something we rush. 4 hours. 4 hours until they would know if 5 years of suffering could be undone, or if Isadora Thornfield would live in silence forever, a permanent reminder of what happened when pride mattered more than truth. Amara looked at the little girl on the imaging table, still holding her hand, still trusting her despite everything. And she made a decision. I want to be there, she said. I want to watch the surgery. Absolutely not, Sebastian Fairchild said. He followed them to the hospital. Of course he had. Still dressed in his rumpled tuxedo, still determined to see Amara punished. She's not family. She's a criminal. She shouldn't be anywhere near. She'll be in the observation room, Dr. Pembroke said, cutting him off. Behind glass. She can watch but not interfere. I think. She paused. I think Grace Okafor's daughter deserves to see if her mother was right. Deserves to witness the outcome of the courage it took to prove it. This is insane, Sebastian said. You're all acting like she's some kind of hero when she committed multiple felonies tonight. I'm preparing legal documents. Trespassing, breaking and entering, theft of valuable property. When this surgery is over, she's being arrested and prosecuted. Good luck with that, Dr. Pembroke said dryly. I'm pretty sure every major news outlet is going to want to interview the 12-year-old who solved what a team of specialists missed. The girl who saved a billionaire's daughter by being smarter and braver than all the adults in the room. You prosecute her, and the Thornfield family becomes the villain in the story. Is that really what you want? Sebastian's face went red. That's not how it works. That's exactly how it works, Dr. Pembroke said. And you know it. So maybe think carefully about whether you want to be remembered as the lawyer who tried to destroy a child for being right. The silence that followed was heavy, complicated, full of unspoken calculations about reputation and public opinion, and how this story would play out in newspapers and social media, and the court of public perception that mattered more than any legal court when you were rich enough to care about your image. She watches from observation, Thaddeus said finally. And after we see if this works, we'll discuss the rest. Legal matters. Consequences. All of it. But not now. Now we focus on Isadora. It wasn't forgiveness. Wasn't even close. But it was a reprieve. A chance. The same thing Isadora was getting. A chance to see if something broken could be fixed, or if some damage lasted forever. The hours between 3 a.m. and dawn felt like years. They felt like decades. They felt like the kind of waiting that aged you, that carved lines into your face and put weight on your shoulders and made you understand why people said time was relative, because when you were waiting to see if you destroyed your life or saved one, minutes stretched into eternities. Amara sat in the hospital cafeteria with her father, neither of them eating the food they'd gotten from vending machines, neither of them speaking because what was there to say? She'd broken into a mansion, stolen jewelry, proven she was right. And now they were waiting to see if being right mattered, if truth was enough, if a 12-year-old girl's courage could undo 5 years of damage caused by adult pride. The cafeteria was empty except for a few exhausted nurses on break and a janitor mopping floors. Amara watched him work, watched the way he moved with the quiet efficiency her father had, the way invisible people always moved, and thought about how many times Grace Okafor had sat in this exact cafeteria, eating terrible food, trying to save lives while the people she worked for barely saw her as human. "You know what your mother would say right now," Jeremiah said suddenly, breaking the silence. Amara looked at him. "What?" "She'd say you're grounded for life." He almost smiled. "Almost. Then she'd hug you until you couldn't breathe and tell you she's never been more proud and more terrified at the same time." "I'm sorry, Daddy," Amara said. "I am sorry I lied. I'm sorry I risked your job. I'm sorry I—" "Don't apologize for being brave," Jeremiah interrupted. "Don't ever apologize for that. Your mother spent her whole life being sorry for taking up space, for speaking up, for daring to think she knew something that powerful people didn't. And it killed her. Not just the cancer, the weight of all that apologizing, all that making herself small." He reached across the table, took her hand. "You don't make yourself small for anyone. Not even for me. Especially not for me." Amara felt tears burning her eyes again. She cried more in the past 12 hours than she had in the entire year since her mother died. "What if I'm wrong?" she whispered. "What if they remove the pearl and Isadora still can't hear? What if I put everyone through this for nothing?" "Then you're wrong," Jeremiah said simply. "But at least you tried. At least you fought. At least you didn't spend the rest of your life wondering what would have happened if you'd been brave enough to try." At 4:30 a.m., a nurse found them and said Dr. Pembroke was ready. The surgical team had assembled. Isadora was being prepped. It was time. The observation room was small, cramped, with a window overlooking the operating theater below. It was designed for medical students and residents, for people learning surgery by watching experts work. Amara had never been in one before. The view was perfect and terrible, close enough to see everything, far enough that you couldn't help, couldn't interfere, could only watch and hope and pray to whatever God might be listening. Thaddeus and Evangeline were already there, pressed against the glass like if they got close enough they could protect their daughter through sheer will. They looked like they'd aged a decade in the past few hours. Evangeline's perfect makeup was ruined, mascara streaked down her face, her expensive gown wrinkled and stained. Thaddeus's tuxedo jacket was gone, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his hair a mess from running his hands through it too many times. They looked human. For the first time since Amara had seen them, they looked like regular people facing something money couldn't fix, power couldn't control, privilege couldn't protect them from. The door opened and another woman entered, older, imperious, dripping with diamonds even at 5 in the morning. She took one look at Amara, and her eyes narrowed with contempt so pure it was almost impressive. "You," she said, her voice like cut glass. "You're the little thief who broke into my son's home." "Mother," Thaddeus said wearily. "Not now. Not now." Octavia Kingsley, grandmother, society matriarch, woman who probably hadn't been told no in 40 years, turned her contempt on her son. "This child commits crimes against our family, and you want me to ignore it? She should be in handcuffs. She should be thanked," Evangeline said quietly. Her voice was raw, broken. "She did what we should have done 5 years ago. She listened. She believed. She fought for our daughter when we were too proud to admit we might be wrong." Octavia stared at her daughter-in-law like she'd started speaking another language. "Have you all lost your minds? She's a criminal. She was right," Thaddeus said, and the words seemed to hurt coming out. "About everything. The pearl. The imaging. The fact that we silence people who try to help. She was right, and we were wrong, and our daughter paid for it." "Show her," Evangeline said, holding out a tablet that had the imaging results. "Show her what that girl found when dozens of specialists couldn't." Octavia took the tablet with obvious reluctance, scrolled through the images. Her face changed, softened. Something that might have been shame flickered across her expression before she locked it down behind decades of practice control. She looked at Amara. "You did this research, this investigation." "My mother did most of it," Amara said. 5 years ago. I just finished what she started. Octavia was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something unexpected. Your mother was Grace Okafor. I remember her. She testified at a board meeting once about staff working conditions. She was eloquent, passionate. Your father had her removed from the meeting. She looked at Thaddeus. You said she was being disruptive, that she didn't understand how hospitals operated, that staff complaints were HR matters, not board concerns. Thaddeus closed his eyes. I remember. She died a year ago, Octavia continued. Cancer. I sent flowers to the funeral. I thought it was the appropriate thing to do. She looked back at Amara. I didn't know she tried to help Isadora. I didn't know we'd silenced her. I didn't know. She trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish. Below them, the operating room was coming to life. Nurses moving with practiced efficiency. Anesthesiologists checking equipment. And Dr. Pembroke, scrubbed and gowned, standing over a surgical table where Isadora lay unconscious. So small under the lights, so vulnerable. She's 8 years old, Evangeline whispered, watching through the glass. She's just a baby, and we let her suffer for 5 years because we were too proud to listen to people we thought were beneath us. Stop, Thaddeus said. Stop punishing yourself. We can do that later. Right now, we just need to focus on her getting through this. The surgery began at dawn, exactly as the sun was starting to lighten the sky outside. Exactly as the world was waking up to a new day, Dr. Pembroke made her first incision. Amara watched with her heart in her throat. She'd read about ear surgeries during her research, had studied the anatomy, had looked at diagrams and videos in medical papers. But watching it happen in real life, watching Dr. Pembroke work with instruments so small they were barely visible, watching her navigate tissue and nerves and the delicate architecture of a human ear was different. This wasn't academic. This was Isadora. This was a little girl who'd smiled at Amara in a hospital playroom, who'd held her hand, who trusted her enough to let her go when she could have stopped her. Talk to me! Dr. Pembroke's voice came through the speaker, addressing someone in the room, but also performing for the observers, explaining what she was doing. I'm approaching the right ear canal. Initial visualization shows significant inflammation. Calcification is extensive. The pearl is embedded approximately 7 millimeters deep, positioned at a 45-degree angle against the cochlear nerve. Amara's hands were clenched so tight her nails were cutting into her palms. Beside her, her father was barely breathing. Across the room, Evangeline was crying silently, Thaddeus's arm around her, both of them watching their daughter's life hang in the balance of a surgery that shouldn't be necessary, that was only necessary because they'd been too proud to listen 5 years ago. I'm using microforceps to carefully separate the calcified tissue from the surrounding canal, Dr. Pembroke continued. Her hands were steady, perfectly steady. Years of training, thousands of surgeries, all leading to this moment. The pearl is visible now, confirming its organic material, approximately 6 millimeters in diameter, consistent with jewelry-grade cultured pearl. That's my earring, Evangeline breathed. That's the pearl from my earring. It's been in her ear this whole time. Oh God, it's really been there. The surgery continued, minute by agonizing minute. Dr. Pembroke working with instruments that looked like they belonged in a jeweler's workshop, not an operating room. Separating tissue, removing calcification, getting closer to the pearl while trying not to damage the nerve that would determine whether Isadora ever heard again. And then something happened. Wait, Dr. Pembroke said, and her voice had changed, had gone tight, worried. The calcification pattern is different than the imaging suggested. It's load-bearing. The pearl has essentially become a structural element. If I remove it from this angle, the nerve membrane is going to tear. Silence in the observation room. Silence in the operating room. Everyone holding their breath. What do we do? One of the surgical nurses asked. Dr. Pembroke was staring at the microscopic field, at the problem that had just revealed itself, at the choice between removing the pearl and risking permanent damage, or leaving it and guaranteeing permanent deafness. I need a minute, she said. I need to think. Dr. Pembroke. Amara's voice cut through the speaker before she even realized she was going to speak. She lunged for the intercom button, ignoring the startled looks from everyone in the observation room. The calcification pattern, it's weight-bearing. You need to approach from the superior angle, not lateral. If you come from above and use the bone structure as leverage, you can remove it without putting tension on the nerve membrane. Everyone stared at her. A 12-year-old girl telling one of the best surgeons in the city how to do her job. It was insane. It was inappropriate. It was... Dr. Pembroke was looking up at the observation window, looking at Amara, processing what she'd said. How do you know that? I read my mother's notes, Amara said, her voice shaking but determined. She documented this exact scenario. She predicted the calcification would be load-bearing. She wrote about approach angles. She knew this would happen because she saw it 5 years ago and no one would listen. Dr. Pembroke was silent for 3 seconds that felt like 3 years. Then she said, "She's right." Wonder in her voice. Wonder and shame and the dawning realization that Grace Okafor had been better at her job than any of them had given her credit for. The superior approach. God, why didn't I see it? Because you weren't looking for it, Amara said. Because you thought the imaging told you everything you needed to know. Because you didn't believe a nurse could see something you missed. The words hung in the air. Truth and accusation and vindication all wrapped together. Dr. Pembroke adjusted her position. Changed her approach angle. Switching to superior entry point, she said. Her voice was clinical again, professional, but there was something else underneath. Respect maybe. Or awe. Using cranial bone structure as anchor point. Applying minimal tension to nerve tissue. The room held its breath. Dr. Pembroke's hands moved with impossible precision. Micro-instruments working in a space barely visible even with magnification. And then, after what felt like forever but was probably only 30 seconds, she said the words everyone had been waiting for. Pearl is free. Extracting now. She pulled back, and in her forceps, held between metal prongs that could barely grip something so small, was a pearl. Cream-colored, lustrous even under surgical lights, roughly the size of a pea. Beautiful in the way that things are beautiful when they've caused suffering, when their elegance masks the damage they've done. Extraction successful, Dr. Pembroke said. No visible tearing of nerve membrane. Minimal bleeding. The canal is clear. Evangeline collapsed. Actually collapsed, her legs giving out. Thaddeus catching her before she hit the floor. She was sobbing, huge wrenching sobs that sounded like they were being torn from somewhere deep inside. It's out, she kept saying. It's out. It's finally out. But Amara knew what no one else seemed to be thinking yet. Removing the pearl didn't mean Isadora would hear again. Didn't mean 5 years of damage could be undone. Didn't mean the story had a happy ending. Subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller right now if you felt that moment when the pearl came out. If you understood the weight of what just happened. If you need to know whether Isadora will ever hear her mother's voice. If you don't subscribe after this chapter, comment below and tell me what kind of person you have to be to walk away now. Tell me. Closing the surgical site, Dr. Pembroke said. Patient is stable. Anesthesia is being reduced. She'll wake up in approximately 20 minutes. She paused. And then we wait. The nerve damage assessment will take hours, possibly days. We won't know if hearing function returns until the swelling goes down and the tissue heals. 20 minutes. 20 minutes until Isadora woke up. 20 minutes until they started the next waiting period. The one that would determine if all of this had been worth it. Amara slumped against the window, exhausted beyond anything she'd ever felt. She'd been awake for almost 24 hours, had broken into a mansion, been caught, been arrested, been vindicated, and watched surgery performed based on her mother's notes. Her body felt like it was made of lead. Her mind felt like it was made of fog. Jeremiah pulled her close. You did it, baby girl. You got them to listen. You got them to look. Whatever happens now, you did everything you could. But what if it's not enough? Amara whispered. What if she still can't hear? Then she can't hear, Jeremiah said. But at least she'll know people fought for her. At least she'll know the truth. Sometimes that matters more than the outcome. The observation room door slammed open. Sebastian Fairchild stood there, looking exhausted and angry, and accompanied by 2 police officers. I've had enough of this circus, he announced. Officers, that girl right there committed multiple felonies tonight. Breaking and entering. Trespassing. Theft. I want her arrested. Now. The officers looked uncomfortable. looked at Amara, looked at the Thornfield family, looked at the situation that was clearly more complicated than Sebastian was making it sound. "Sir," one officer said carefully, "maybe we should wait until—" "I'm not waiting for anything," Sebastian interrupted. "She's a criminal. She broke the law. The fact that she happened to be right about something doesn't change what she did." "Actually," a new voice said from the doorway behind him, "I think it changes everything." Helena Kozlov stood there, and she wasn't alone. Behind her were cameras, news crews, reporters with microphones and recording equipment. The press had arrived. "What is this?" Thaddeus demanded. "How did they get in here?" "Security should have." "I called them," Helena said. Her voice was shaking but determined. Her face was tear-stained but resolute. "I called them because I've been silent for 5 years and I'm done. I'm done protecting people who don't deserve protection. I'm done carrying guilt that isn't mine. I'm done watching truth get buried because it's inconvenient for powerful people." She walked into the room, cameras following, and the dynamic shifted immediately. This wasn't a private family matter anymore. This was public. This was news. This was a story that would be on every channel by morning. 5 years ago," Helena said, speaking directly to the cameras now, performing her confession for the world, "I was Isadora Thornfield's nanny. I watched her put a pearl in her ear. I tried to tell her parents. They accused me of lying, of breaking jewelry, of trying to cover up negligence. They threatened to deport my family if I didn't sign papers saying there was no foreign body. They made me choose between truth and survival. I chose survival, and a little girl paid for it. The cameras were eating it up. This was gold. Scandal. Wealthy family silencing staff. Immigrant woman forced to choose between truth and family. A child suffering because adults cared more about reputation than reality. "Mr. Thornfield," a reporter called out, "is it true you threatened staff members who try to help your daughter?" "Mrs. Thornfield," another reporter said, "did you know about the pearl and choose not to investigate?" "Is it true," a third reporter asked, "that a 12-year-old girl had to break into your home to prove what medical professionals missed?" The questions came like bullets. The Thornfield family, so used to controlling narratives, so used to having PR people and lawyers manage their image, were exposed and vulnerable and facing consequences they couldn't buy their way out of. "Get them out," Thaddeus said to the police officers. "Get these cameras out of here. This is a hospital. This is a private. This is public interest," Helena interrupted. "This is what happens when rich people decide truth is negotiable. This is what happens when nurses like Grace Okafor try to do the right thing and get crushed for it. This is what happens when a 12-year-old girl has to become a criminal to save a life." "That's enough," Sebastian said, trying to control the situation, trying to limit the damage. "Officers, clear these people out. Now. And arrest that girl for—" "For what?" Helena demanded. "For being right. For being braver than any of us. For doing what we should have done 5 years ago. For breaking the law," Sebastian said through gritted teeth. "The law doesn't care about motivation. It cares about action. She committed crimes. She gets punished. That's how it works." "Then punish me too," Helena said. "I gave her the earring. I told her about the mansion. I helped her plan the break-in. I'm an accessory. Arrest me." "And me," Dr. Pembroke said from the doorway of the observation room. She'd come up from the surgical floor, still in her scrubs, still in her blood-stained gloves. "I allowed her to watch the surgery. I listened to her advice during a critical moment. I made medical decisions based on information obtained through a crime. Arrest me." "This is insane," Sebastian said. "This is accountability," Dr. Pembroke shot back. "Something this family has avoided for 5 years. You want to prosecute a child for exposing your mistakes, for proving you silenced people who tried to help, for showing the world that wealth doesn't protect you from consequences." She looked at the cameras. "Go ahead. Make her the villain in this story. See how that plays out for the Thornfield family reputation." The room was chaos. Reporters shouting questions. Cameras recording everything. Police officers completely out of their depth. Sebastian Fairchild trying to control a situation that was spiraling beyond anyone's control. And in the middle of it all, Thaddeus Thornfield stood silent, watching his world collapse, watching 5 years of carefully maintained image crumble in real time. "Mr. Thornfield," a reporter called out, "will you be pressing charges against the girl who saved your daughter?" Every camera turned to him, every microphone, every recording device. The question hanging in the air like a challenge, like a test, like the choice that would define how history remembered this moment. Thaddeus looked at Amara, at this 12-year-old girl who'd broken into his house, stolen from him, proven him wrong, saved his daughter. He looked at the cameras, at his wife sobbing against the window, at his mother watching with her arms crossed, at the police officers waiting for instruction. And then, from the operating room below, a sound. A small sound, barely audible through the intercom. The sound of something metallic hitting the floor. A nurse had dropped a surgical instrument. A pen, maybe. Or a tool. It didn't matter what it was. What mattered was that in the recovery area, visible through the observation window, Isadora's eyes opened. And her head turned toward the sound. She'd heard it. After 5 years of silence, Isadora Thornfield had heard something fall. Evangeline screamed. Actually screamed, pressing her face against the glass, watching her daughter move, watching her daughter's face register confusion and wonder and the slow, dawning realization that something had changed, that the world wasn't silent anymore. She heard it. Evangeline sobbed. "Oh my God!" She heard the sound. She turned her head. She heard it. The operating room erupted in controlled chaos. Nurses rushing to check vitals, to document the response, to verify what they just witnessed. Dr. Pembroke was back in the room, checking Isadora, speaking to her even though the girl probably couldn't understand words yet, couldn't process language, was just hearing sound for the first time in 5 years and trying to make sense of it. And in the observation room, with cameras rolling and reporters recording and the whole world watching, Thaddeus Thornfield looked at Amara one more time. "No," he said. "No charges. This girl saved my daughter's life. She did what I should have done 5 years ago. She listened when I didn't. She fought when I was too proud to admit I might be wrong." He looked at the cameras. Grace Okafor tried to tell us. Helena Kozlov tried to tell us. And we silenced them both because protecting our image mattered more than protecting our daughter. That ends now. The room went silent except for Evangeline's sobbing and the faint sound of Isadora, awake now, making small noises of confusion and wonder as she heard her own voice for the first time in 5 years. Justice, it turned out, sounded like a little girl hearing a pen drop. And the whole world was listening. The cameras were still rolling when they brought Isadora up to the observation room. Dr. Pembroke carried her, the little girl still groggy from anesthesia, wrapped in a hospital blanket, her right ear bandaged, but her eyes wide and confused and overwhelmed. She was making sounds. Small, experimental sounds. Humming. Testing. Trying to understand why suddenly there was noise where there had been nothing. Why the world had exploded into sensation after 5 years of silence. Evangeline reached for her daughter with trembling hands, and when Isadora saw her mother's face, saw her mouth moving, something clicked. The connection between movement and sound. Between lips forming shapes and the vibrations that reached her ear. She was hearing her mother speak for the first time in 5 years, and the confusion on her face was transforming into wonder, into shock, into something that looked like joy mixed with fear mixed with complete overwhelm. "Mama," Isadora said. Her voice was rusty, uncertain, like she'd forgotten how to shape the word. But she said it, actually said it, and hearing her own voice seemed to surprise her so much she said it again, louder, testing, marveling. "Mama, Mama." Evangeline collapsed onto her knees, pulling Isadora close, sobbing so hard she couldn't speak, couldn't form words, could only hold her daughter and shake with the weight of 5 years of guilt and grief, and the impossible miracle of getting a second chance. "I'm sorry," she kept saying between sobs. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry I didn't listen. I'm so sorry you suffered. I'm so sorry, so sorry, so sorry." Isadora probably couldn't understand all the words yet. Couldn't process language that quickly after 5 years without it. But she understood emotion, understood her mother's tears, understood that something huge had changed, that the adults around her were crying and laughing, and that the silence she'd lived in was gone, shattered, replaced by overwhelming noise. She looked around the room, taking it all in. The reporters, The cameras, her grandmother standing with her hand over her mouth, the police officers looking uncomfortable, her father watching with tears streaming down his face. And then her eyes found Amara. Recognition lit up her face. She pulled away from her mother, stumbled across the room on unsteady legs, and threw her arms around Amara with the fierce intensity only children have. And she said something that made every adult in the room go silent. "You saved me." 3 words. Simple. True. The voice of a child who understood more than anyone had given her credit for, who'd been watching and learning and reading lips and knowing that something was wrong, that adults were failing her, that she needed someone to fight for her. "You saved me," she said again, and Amara felt something break inside her chest. All the fear, all the tension, all the terror of the past 24 hours, it all came crashing down at once, and she was crying too, holding this little girl who'd trusted her, who'd let her go when she could have stopped her, who'd chosen truth over loyalty. "Your mama saved you," Amara whispered back. "My mama. She saw it 5 years ago. She knew. She tried. And now you can hear again because she was right." Isadora pulled back, looked at Amara's face, and signed something that Amara didn't understand. But Helena was there, had followed the news crews, was watching from the doorway. "She's saying thank you," Helena translated, tears streaming down her own face. "She's saying thank you for being brave." The news crews were recording everything. This moment of redemption, of justice, of powerful people being forced to admit they were wrong, was going to be on every channel by breakfast. The story was already being written in real time. Billionaire family silences medical staff. Daughter suffers for 5 years. 12-year-old girl breaks in to prove the truth. Child's hearing restored in dramatic surgery. It was perfect. It was viral gold. It was exactly the kind of story that would dominate news cycles for weeks. And Sebastian Fairchild, standing in the corner with his perfect tuxedo and his legal documents and his plan to destroy a 12-year-old, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. He tried to slip out quietly, but Thaddeus's voice stopped him. "Sebastian, my office. Monday morning. We'll discuss your termination." Sebastian's face went white. "Sir, I was just trying to protect the family's interests." "You were trying to prosecute a child for being right," Thaddeus said coldly. "You were trying to silence the truth the same way we've been silencing it for 5 years. That's over. You're over. Get out of my sight." Sebastian left, and Amara felt a vicious satisfaction watching him go. Good. Let him lose something. Let him understand what it felt like when power turned on you. Helena was still standing in the doorway, crying and shaking and looking like she might collapse from relief. Evangeline crossed to her, still crying herself, and did something no one expected. She dropped to her knees in front of her former nanny. "I'm sorry," Evangeline said. "I'm so sorry. You tried to tell me. You tried to save her. And I destroyed you for it. I was more concerned about a broken earring than my daughter suffering. I was more concerned about blame than truth. I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry." Helena looked down at this wealthy woman kneeling before her, begging forgiveness, and for a moment Amara wasn't sure what she would do. 5 years of guilt. 5 years of being too afraid to speak up. 5 years of watching a little girl suffer from a distance because she'd chosen survival over courage. That kind of weight didn't disappear just because someone apologized. But Helena was better than that. Kinder than she needed to be. She reached down, helped Evangeline to her feet, and said simply, she can hear now, "That's what matters." The press conference happened 3 hours later. Thaddeus Thornfield, looking like he'd aged a decade, stood in front of cameras and admitted everything. Admitted they'd silenced Grace Okafor. Admitted they threatened Helena Kozlov. Admitted they'd chosen reputation over their daughter's health. Admitted that a 12-year-old girl had done what a team of specialists couldn't because she'd listened when they wouldn't. "I take full responsibility," he said, and his voice was hollow, stripped of all its usual authority. "My pride nearly cost my daughter her hearing permanently. My arrogance silenced people who tried to help. I failed as a father and as a human being, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends." It was the kind of public apology that would be analyzed and dissected and debated, but Amara thought it might actually be genuine, might actually be real. Because Thaddeus Thornfield had been forced to watch his daughter suffer because of his choices, And that kind of reckoning changed people. Maybe not permanently, maybe not completely, but in that moment, his remorse seemed real. The aftermath was chaotic and complicated and messy in the way real life always is. Sebastian Fairchild was fired and hired lawyers of his own, threatening wrongful termination suits that would probably be settled quietly out of court. Helena Kozlov received a settlement large enough that she'd never have to work again, plus a public apology from the Thornfield family. The story dominated news for 2 weeks, then faded as new scandals emerged, but the damage to the Thornfield reputation was lasting. And Amara became famous in a way she absolutely hated. News crews wanted interviews. Talk shows wanted her story. Social media made her a hero, which meant half the internet loved her and the other half found reasons to tear her down. She deleted her social media accounts after 3 days and refused all interview requests except one, a single statement she made standing next to her father. My mother, Grace Okafor, was a nurse who tried to do the right thing and was punished for it. She saw injustice and spoke up, and it cost her everything. She died believing no one would ever know she was right. I did this for her. I did this so her voice wouldn't be silenced forever. I did this because some truths are worth fighting for, even when you're scared, even when you might lose everything. That's what she taught me. That's what I hope people remember. If this story moved you, if it made you believe in justice, if it reminded you that one person can change everything, subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller right now. Because every single week, we tell stories about people who refuse to be silenced. About underdogs who became heroes. About truth winning against power. If you felt this journey with Amara and Isadora, that subscribe button is right there. And if you don't hit it, if you just scroll away after everything you just heard, comment below and tell me why their story wasn't worth 10 seconds of your time. Tell me why Grace's sacrifice doesn't deserve to be remembered. Tell me why you're okay forgetting about Amara's courage. I'm waiting for your explanation. 3 months passed before the real changes started to show. 3 months of Isadora in speech therapy, learning to process language again, her brain rewiring itself to understand sound after 5 years of adaptation to deafness. 3 months of lawsuits and settlements and investigations into Thornfield Medical Center's practices. 3 months of Amara trying to return to normal life and discovering that normal didn't exist anymore, that she crossed a line and couldn't uncross it, that being right had consequences just like being wrong did. But some of the consequences were good. Thaddeus Thornfield announced the creation of the Grace Okafor Patient Advocacy Program at every hospital his family owned. A formal system where staff could report concerns without fear of retaliation, where nurses and janitors and everyone else who kept hospitals running had a voice that couldn't be silenced by administrators or donors or anyone else with power. It was named after Amara's mother. Grace's photo was hung in the main lobby of Thornfield Medical Center with a plaque that said, "She spoke up so others could hear." Jeremiah was promoted to facilities director with a salary that meant they could finally move out of their cramped apartment, could finally stop worrying about medical bills, could finally breathe. He accepted with dignity, but also with the understanding that this was guilt money, conscience money, the kind of promotion that happened when rich people needed to feel better about themselves. But he also understood that sometimes you took what you could get, that pride didn't pay rent, that his daughter needed stability more than he needed moral purity. Amara received a full scholarship to Preston Academy, one of those prestigious prep schools where future senators and CEOs sent their children. The kind of place she never could have afforded, never would have even applied to. But she accepted it on one condition, that the scholarship program be extended to children of all hospital staff, that other kids like her got the same chance. The school agreed, probably because the PR was too good to pass up, probably because they wanted to be part of the redemption story. But Amara didn't care about their motivations. She cared about results. Dr. Pembroke was honored by the medical community for her surgical success, for the innovative approach, for saving Isadora's hearing. But in every interview, every award ceremony, every public appearance, she said the same thing. I didn't save her. Grace Okafor identified the problem 5 years ago. Amara Okafor solved it when I couldn't. I just did what I should have done 5 years ago, which was listen. And Isadora was the most complicated transformation of all. She could hear now, could process sound, could understand speech. But she refused to forget the 5 years she'd lived in silence. Refused to pretend it hadn't happened. refused to let people treat her deafness like a problem that had been fixed and could now be forgotten. "It taught me to see what others miss," she said in an interview 6 months after the surgery. She was 8 years old, speaking with the careful precision of someone still learning to modulate volume and tone, but her words were clear. When you can't hear, you watch everything. You notice body language. You see when people are lying. You understand that words aren't the only way to communicate. I don't want to forget that. The deaf community taught me things I wouldn't have learned if I could hear. I want to bridge both worlds." She and Amara became unlikely friends, meeting every week despite living in different universes of wealth and privilege. Isadora would come to Amara's neighborhood, and they'd walk to the hospital together, and Isadora would practice her sign language with deaf patients while Amara helped her father with random tasks. Bridging worlds, refusing to let class or money or the circumstances of their meeting divide them. Evangeline and Thaddeus were different people now. Humbled, careful, trying to repair a reputation that would never fully recover but might, eventually, become something better than it was. They established family therapy, made time for Isadora in ways they hadn't before. Listened when she spoke, really listened, understanding that hearing her voice was a privilege they'd almost lost forever. And Octavia Kingsley, imperious grandmother who'd initially blamed Amara for everything, shocked everyone by establishing the Silenced Voices Foundation, dedicated to helping victims of medical malpractice who couldn't afford lawyers, who couldn't fight institutions, who needed someone with power and money on their side. It was penance. It was guilt. But it was also real, and it helped real people, and sometimes that had to be enough. A year after the surgery, Thornfield Medical Center unveiled something that made Amara cry for the first time since the night of the break-in. The pediatric wing, the place where her mother had worked for 15 years, was renamed. A ceremony was held. Local news covered it. Former colleagues of Grace's attended. And when they pulled back the curtain, Amara saw the plaque that would greet every patient, every family, every person who walked through those doors. Grace Okafor Memorial Wing, where every voice matters. Her mother's name, in bronze, permanent, impossible to ignore or forget or silence. Proof that Grace Okafor had existed, had mattered, had been right even when no one would listen. Amara stood in front of that plaque with her father's arm around her shoulders and Isadora holding her hand, and thought about all the ways stories could end. This wasn't the ending where her mother came back. Wasn't the ending where 5 years of suffering could be erased. Wasn't the ending where injustice was completely defeated and powerful people learned permanent lessons. But it was an ending where truth won, where courage mattered, where a nurse's voice, silenced in life, echoed in death through her daughter, where a little girl got to hear again, where two families from opposite sides of every divide found common ground, where change, however imperfect, however incomplete, became possible. That night, Amara read her mother's journal one last time. The entry from 5 years ago. "If I couldn't save her, someone will." Grace had written those words not knowing they were prophecy, not knowing her daughter would read them someday and understand them as marching orders, as permission, as proof that some fights were worth starting even if you didn't live to finish them. "You did save her, Mama," Amara whispered to the empty room. "Through me. You saved her through me. Some stories don't end. They just find new people to carry them forward." 1 year after the surgery, Amara stood on a stage in Washington, D.C. accepting a National Youth Science Award for her research on innovative ear canal imaging techniques for the paper she'd written based on her mother's notes and her own investigation for advancing medical understanding in ways that would help other children avoid Isadora's fate. She was 13 now. Tailleur, more confident, still carrying the weight of what she'd done but learning how to hold it. In the audience, Isadora sat with her parents, clapping when Amara's name was called, smiling that knowing smile that said we did this together, we changed the world together, we proved that truth matters and courage counts and people like us can win sometimes. And the next day, Isadora testified before a congressional committee on healthcare access and equality, the youngest person ever to do so. She spoke about the 5 years she'd lived in silence, about the nurses and nannies who tried to help and been silenced, about the class divides that determined who got heard and who got ignored, about the need for systemic change that went beyond individual redemption stories. She was 8 years old and speaking to senators, and they listened because how could they not? Because this was the girl who'd been saved by a 12-year-old breaking into a mansion, because the story was too big and too compelling and too perfect to ignore. The pearl itself ended up in a museum. Not a big museum, just the small one in Thornfield Medical Center's lobby, in a case next to Grace Okafor's photo. A tiny cream-colored sphere that had caused so much suffering, that had revealed so much about power and pride and the cost of silence. The plaque beneath it said, "Removed from Isadora Thornfield's ear after 5 years." A reminder that truth matters more than reputation, that courage comes in unexpected forms, and that sometimes the smallest voices deserve the loudest hearing. People would walk past it every day, patients and families, and staff and administrators. They would read the story. They would learn about Grace and Amara and Isadora and Helena. They would understand, maybe, that institutions weren't neutral, that power protected itself, that speaking up had consequences, but so did staying silent. And maybe, just maybe, the next time a nurse saw something that specialists missed, the next time a nanny witnessed something that needed reporting, the next time a janitor's daughter needed to fight for truth, they would remember the story. Would remember that sometimes, against all odds, courage won. That sometimes, despite everything, justice was possible. That sometimes, truth mattered more than power. The last image, the one that Amara would carry forward, happened on a random Tuesday afternoon 3 years after the surgery. She was 16 now, volunteering at the hospital where her mother had worked, where her father now managed facilities, where Grace's name hung on the wall in permanent bronze. In the pediatric playroom, Amara and Isadora were teaching sign language to a group of children. Deaf kids learning from Isadora, who could hear now but refused to forget where she came from. Hearing kids learning from Amara, who understood that communication was bigger than sound. Kids from wealthy families and kids from poor families, kids who spoke English and kids who spoke Spanish, and kids who spoke with their hands, all learning together in a space that used to be divided by class and money and power. "Why are you teaching us this?" one kid asked. "If we can hear, why do we need sign language?" Isadora looked at Amara. Amara looked at Isadora. And they both smiled. "Because," Isadora said, her voice clear now, confident, no longer rusty with disuse, "not everyone communicates the same way. And if you only listen with your ears, you miss what people are saying with their hands, their faces, their bodies. You miss the truth that's too hard to speak out loud. You miss the voices that get silenced. Plus," Amara added, "it's cool. And it makes you pay attention to what people aren't saying out loud. My mama taught me that. The things people don't say are sometimes more important than the things they do." The kids went back to practicing their signs, fingers fumbling through alphabets and simple words, and Amara thought about how far they'd come. From a mansion break-in to this moment, from being arrested to teaching children, from her mother's silenced voice to a memorial wing bearing her name, from 5 years of deafness to a little girl who could hear but chose to remember what silence taught her. Some stories had happy endings. Some had tragic ones. And some, like this one, had something more complicated and more real, something that acknowledged that healing wasn't the same as erasure, that justice wasn't the same as perfection, that winning didn't mean everyone got everything they'd lost back. But it meant something. It changed something. It proved that truth could win, that courage mattered, that one person could make a difference even when every system was designed to stop them. Amara looked at her mother's photograph on the wall, at the bronze plaque that said, "Where every voice matters," and felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe. Or purpose. Or just the understanding that she'd done what she set out to do. She'd finished what her mother started. She'd made Grace Okafor's voice impossible to silence. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. The story of Amara Okafor and Isadora Thornfield would be told for years. In news articles and medical journals, in ethics classes and hospital training programs, in conversations about power and privilege and the cost of speaking truth. It would become legend, simplified and exaggerated and molded to fit whatever point the teller wanted to make. But the real story, the true story, was simpler than legend and more complicated than headlines. It was about a nurse who saw injustice and spoke up, about a nanny who lived with guilt, about a father who chose survival until his daughter chose courage, about a doctor who learned humility, about a family, who learned that wealth couldn't protect them from consequences. About a 12-year-old girl who decided that some truths were worth risking everything for. And about the truth itself, which turned out to be small and pearl-like and capable of causing damage or redemption depending on whether people chose to look for it or look away. In the end, they chose to look, and a little girl could hear again. And that had to be enough. That had to matter. That had to mean something. Because if it didn't, if courage and truth and sacrifice didn't matter, then what was the point of any of it? What was the point of speaking up when silence was safer? What was the point of fighting when losing was easier? Amara didn't have answers to those questions, but she knew her mother had died believing truth mattered. And she knew Isadora could hear because someone had been brave enough to prove it. And she knew that somewhere, in hospitals and homes and places where powerful people made decisions that affected powerless ones, someone might remember the story and choose differently. Might choose truth over reputation. Might choose courage over silence. Might choose to listen when it would be easier to look away. And if even one person made that choice, if even one voice got heard that would have been silenced, if even one child was saved because someone remembered what happened when a 12-year-old broke into a mansion to prove the truth, then maybe it was all worth it. Maybe it was enough. Maybe it was everything. The sun was setting through the hospital windows, casting golden light across the playroom where children were learning to communicate in ways that transcended sound. Amara watched them, watched Isadora teaching with patient hands, watched her father walking past the door with his facilities director badge, watched the world that had changed because someone had been brave enough to demand it change. And she thought about her mother, about Grace Okafor, about the nurse who tried to save a little girl and been silenced for it, about how death didn't have to mean the end of a voice, how legacy could be carried forward by the people who remembered, how truth could echo across years and find new champions to speak it. "Thank you, Mama," Amara whispered, "for teaching me to fight, for showing me that truth matters, for being brave even when it cost you everything. I finished it. I finished what you started, and I'm going to keep finishing it every day for as long as I live." The photograph on the wall didn't answer, couldn't answer, but in the bronze plaque beneath it, in the memorial wing that bore her name, in the children learning sign language in a playroom she used to clean, in the daughter who'd become the kind of person who broke rules to save lives, Grace Okafor's answer was clear. Some voices couldn't be silenced. Not really. Not forever. They just waited for the right person to hear them. And Amara had heard. And the world was different because of it. And that was how stories worked. They didn't end. They just found new people to carry them forward.